tonight. Good to see you. Merry Christmas to those who celebrate the Christmas holiday. To those who do not, happy whatever holiday you do celebrate, and Happy New Year. I am having a great day, and it's a lot of fun to be able to get on here and talk with the community, right? We are a community, and we are here, and today is a legal holiday in the United States, and I am here and I'm going to chat with you all. We're going to have an interesting discussion tonight. So, like I always say, we want to make this a bigger discussion. So, the more people here, the better. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. Always a pleasure to talk with all of you. Our normal format is I give my opening remarks, and then from there, after I give my opening remarks, I do my roll call, and I call you out as I see you, names and locations, names and locations. We find out the community of people who are watching. And then, after that, I answer your super chat questions. And that's how we play the game here. So, for those of you who are with us right now, like I said, glad you're here. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Invite your friends to join us. Post this on Facebook, post this on Twitter, post this on Reddit, post this wherever videos and live streams are posted. Bring people along. Make this fun. The more people here, the more fun we have. I'm going to change the comments so I see all comments, not just top comments, right? I hit the all comments. So that's good. I'll see all the comments as they come in, right? Not just the top ones. You have to change that. So I'll be seeing your comments as you're rolling by. Like right now, I'm seeing Red Sea Socialist who says Merry Christmas all and has a little icon of a Christmas tree. That's very nice. Thank you. I see someone else saying Happy Holidays. Someone said Paul Wellstone and his assassination. I can write that down. I'm not sure it was an assassination. I think it was just a plane crash. But, I mean, if you have a theory, that's for you to put out there. But we can talk about Paul Wellstone. All righty. I'm seeing Johnny Mead saying, let's go. I'm seeing Harold Sullivan saying Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I'm seeing Severejo Filiani saying Merry Christmas. I'm seeing all kinds of people here, and that's so much fun. Thoughts on Historically Podcast? All right. Historically Podcast. All righty. And there we go. So, folks, I guess I'm going to jump into the opening remarks. So, welcome. Let's just jump into it. But before we get started, I would like everyone to just stop what you are doing. CPI funding. Just stop what you are doing. Trot orgs popular. Just stop what you're doing. Just pause for a minute. Just pause for 1 minute and breathe. Breathe. Take a big, deep breath. Just breathe. Just breathe. Let's just slow down for a little bit. Let's just slow down tonight a little bit. Someone sent me a super chat about Trotskyists, direct worker control in China. Just breathe. Jesus Revolutionary, very good super chat. Just breathe a little bit. Breathe. COVID UK. New strain. Merry Christmas, brother. I hope your holidays have gone well. Well, they have. They have. And thank you, Space Communist, for the super chat. Much appreciated. Just breathe. Breathe a little bit. Breathe. Breathe a little bit. Slow down. Folks, a lot of things have happened in the news. We know there was a bombing in Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville Today explosion. There was a bombing in Nashville, Tennessee. Oh, breaking up monopolies. Okay. Breaking up monopolies. We know that Israel is bombing Syria right now and unloading an attack against the internationally recognized Syrian government that protects Christians. We also know that this is not exactly the best Christmas holiday many of us have ever had. People aren't able to see their relatives. People aren't able to travel. There's a lot on people's minds. So just breathe a little bit. Just take this moment to breathe. 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 DPRK. Join USSR. Just breathe a little bit. Folks, I want to put all the political things we talk about not completely aside. We're going to talk about them, right? We're not going to forget them. That's why you're here. If I was on here to talk about puppies and rainbows, you wouldn't particularly care for it. We're going to talk about politics tonight. Definitely going to talk about it. Look at all those super chats. The second half is way political, but even this first half is going to be a little bit political. But for just a moment, I want you to breathe. Gus Hall, Little Steel Strike, Ohio. Folks, you all are deeply, deeply important to me. I would not have gotten through this pandemic without you. Folks, I consider it a privilege to be able to get on here and interact with all of you. It's really an absolute privilege. It's fun, and I enjoy it. There's something special about getting on here and engaging with all of you, answering your questions, talking about our running jokes about unnamed diet beverage and unnamed orange beverage, and running down Vosh and Skippy the Bear, and talking ideology and history. It's really, really pleasurable for me. It really has given me something to look forward to in these rather dark times of pandemic and capitalism in decay. Back right at you, Dan Keating. And I want to just thank you for everything. And tonight, I'm going to talk about a couple things that I think can help bring you the peace of mind and the hope and the optimism to keep going in these dark times. I feel like I'm doing more than just running a news show, right? I mean, this isn't just me coming on here about the news of the world. This isn't me just coming on here and screaming and yelling against big corporations and calling for a socialist revolution. I view the importance of this program and the importance of these live streams as me doing my best to give people hope in dark times, to give people what I have. Folks, being a communist, being a socialist revolutionary has been the most amazing thing I've ever experienced in life. Life doesn't get better than this, right? This has completely given me a purpose, a reason to be. It has given me an understanding of things, a depth, a knowledge, a mission. It is something that I really, really am happy about. And it's really a pleasure to share it with all of you. Advice for creating an ML program. Okay. For creating ML program. Worker councils. All right. Folks, this world can be a very difficult place to get through. A very difficult place to get through. It's full of bad things, like I told you about at the beginning of the live, like car bombings in Nashville and explosions in Nashville and Israel bombing Syria. And yes, there's plenty of bad things in this world, but there are little things that we can do that can help give us the strength to get through this hardship and make our great contribution to the revolution and to humanity. Optimism for Venezuela. There are little things we can do, and I just want to talk about a couple of those things, a couple things I've learned to do, how I learned to do them, in order to get through rough times like these and get through the rough world of capitalism. Just want to talk about a couple things, couple everyday things that you can do to how to be anti-imperialist in the U.S. A couple things that you can do to get through this world of capitalism and greed and destruction and war. Right? A couple things you can do to strengthen your ability to resist the system, your ability to make a contribution. I want to talk about them. I want to talk about how I related to these things and how my knowledge expanded. The first thing that I want to talk about is music. Music is amazing. Music is one of the greatest things human beings have ever created. Music, right? We human beings have developed this thing called music that can affect our mood, that can affect our mind, that can give us strength, it can unleash emotions, it can train us. Music is utterly amazing. It is an amazing human invention. And music is part of all of our lives. Look, you cannot go through a day in our modern world without hearing music from different places, from television, from radio, from walking down the street, from advertisements. Music is all around us. And music, just like anything else, is a tool. I didn't realize that. I didn't really realize that until recently. Music is not simply a mode of entertainment. Music is a tool. Folks, I'll tell you about my relationship with music. My goodness. Dark money Vosh. I'm going to talk about my relationship with music. Folks, when I was a kid, my parents were big fans of folk music. They loved folk music. I would go with my mom and my dad and my brother, and we would sit there and listen to guys play the guitar and strum on their guitars, and tell little stories and anecdotes. And sometimes they'd play the banjo, and sometimes they would play the ukulele. And folk music was very much a big part of my upbringing, right? Folk music. And when we were in the car, we were listening to folk music albums. Folk music, my parents sang folk music around the house. My grandmother, I would go over to her house and she would dance around the house and be, singing old Irish tunes to herself. And that folk music was very much a part of my upbringing. Now, I got to a certain age where in my room I had a clock radio. Right? And this clock radio that I had in my room, it had an alarm clock on it, so I could get up in the morning and go take a shower and brush my teeth and eat breakfast and get ready for school. But it also had, a radio on it. And before I went to sleep at night, I would listen to the radio. right? And I remember I was at a certain age where it was this big deal that I got myself a clock radio. Clock radio in my bedroom, and I would listen to music before I went to sleep. Fanon, listen to music before I went to sleep, and then I would awaken in the morning with the alarm. And my parents were quite concerned about me getting this clock radio, right? Because they were worried about what music and what radio I might listen to on that clock radio. They were very, very concerned that, I might listen to music that had pornography or violence in it. So they were very, very adamant that I listen to only one station on my clock radio. And that station, and I don't even know if it's still around, it might still be around, 89.7 WKSU. And I don't know, folks from Ohio, maybe you'll know if 89.7 WKSU is still around. But that was the NPR National Public Radio station out of Kent State University. And in the evenings, they played classical music during the week. And in the evenings, on the weekends, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they had a host. I think his name was Jim Bloom. And Jim Bloom would do a folk music show. So, from about the time I was in about third grade up until about, when I was in junior high, high school, every night I would go to sleep on the week. During the weeknights, I would listen to classical music, and during the weekends, I would listen to the folk music. And that's what I would listen to. And the folk music did not really interest me. Or I'm sorry, the classical music did not really interest me. I would put on the classical music and I would drift off to sleep. I wasn't even really listening to it. I didn't particularly care for it. Fred Hampton. My goodness, you guys are generous with the super chats tonight. That's okay. I will answer your questions. I will answer all your questions. And, I would listen to the folk music on the weekends. And the weekend folk music that I would listen to, I was very interested in. They would play Irish folk music, they would play American folk music, bluegrass, all kinds of stuff, old ballads. And I got to know that folk music very, very well. In fact, and a couple times for Christmas, my parents would ask me what I wanted, and this was back in the day of CDs. I would ask them for CDs of various folk bands that I had listened to on 89.7 WKSU. But as I got a little older, I started to get interested in rock music, right? I got interested in like 1960s rock. I remember at one point at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, they had a big exhibit about the life of John Lennon, one of the Beatles. And I went to this exhibit and I found it fascinating. John Lennon, fascinating stuff, Imagine, all of this. I got very interested in the Beatles. I got very interested in different things. I missed a super chat. My goodness, what did I miss? I'm going back up. How does your family, what does your family, okay, all right, no problem. All right, turning the page to write down another super chat. Family, think. And, I got into rock and roll. And I remember I had some of my parents' old vinyl records, and I would listen to some of the Beatles music. I would buy Beatles CDs. I'd listen to the Rolling Stones, etc. And I had a friend in high school who was really into Pink Floyd. And, my relationship with music expanded. How? Okay. Asbol claims. My relationship with music expanded, and I still liked folk music. I didn't particularly like classical music because I just thought it was boring. I was never really a very good musician. I do remember playing the piano when I was of a young age. I did take piano lessons, but I was not very good at it. I could never really come to understand how to read music. I just didn't have the dedication to really learn to read music where I could just look at the sheet and play it. I never could really, I have to sit there, A, B, C, D, F. I just couldn't learn to read music. I played the trombone in the marching band. Um, Gramsci. Wow, you guys are just coming at me tonight. All right, Gramsci. So, I remember when I was in college, I had a roommate. He was a friend of mine, a roommate. He also did political activism with me. And I had won this guy to communism. And he was a conservative when I first met him. And he was a music composition major when I first met him. At my college, they had a conservatory of music. And I remember that I told him in a conversation, I said, classical music is boring. And he said to me, listen to Richard Wagner. Classical music is not boring. Listen to Wagner. And I thought, really? And so I got out, my laptop, I typed into YouTube Wagner, and I listened to, I'd already heard Flight of the Valkyries. That's just like a cultural icon, right? But then from there, I heard the Siegfried Funeral March. And that is an amazing piece of music. You're just like on the edge of your seat when you hear the Siegfried Funeral March, Bum, 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 bum. It does so many things with you. It's such amazing emotional manipulation. And I was like, wow, classical music is definitely not boring. Wow. Wow. So as much as one might criticize Wagner for his anti-Semitism or his emotional manipulation and kind of the crassness of his music, I mean, you have to admit that I owe Richard Wagner, and thank you, Ava. I owe Wagner a debt of appreciation because he got me to actually give classical music another chance. And so I listened to Wagner. And it used to be, I was into the folk music. And as I moved on from college, was in Cleveland, eventually moved to New York, I was into the folk music. And I would listen to Wagner, and that was about it. That was about it. But then I got to the point where I realized that a lot of things in my life would be better if I could learn to keep a clear head, if I could calm down. Things would be much better if I could learn to calm down. I started listening to different people who had different analysis. When America becomes a form of Yugoslavia, I don't even know what that question is. Okay. I realized that when I listened to classical music, the reason that it had bored me was because it was not spitting emotion at me. And the reason I'd liked Wagner is because it was spitting emotion at me. It was like, boom. But I got to the point in my life where I realized that many things, many situations I was in life would be better if I could calm down and I could keep a clear head. And I was listening to different people and their critiques of popular culture and such. And based on that, I started doing something. I started beginning every day. Every day, I would wake up, I would open my unnamed diet soda, which is my replacement for coffee, and I would play Bach, Beethoven, or Mozart on my cell phone. All right? My cell phone, my alarm goes off, and I still do this. My alarm goes off, and I put on Bach, Beethoven, or Mozart. I drink my soda, waking up to classical music. Sometimes Haydn. And I'd go to sleep every night. I'd get in bed, turn out the lights, put on my little sleeping mask that I cover my eyes with, and I put on Bach, Beethoven, or Mozart in order to calm down. And I learned to listen to Bach, Beethoven, and Mozart differently than I listened to rock and roll music and I listened to Wagner. Because the reason that classical music had been boring to me was because I was listening to it as if I were listening to rock and roll music. Stalin, supply Nazis with oil. Goodness gracious. You guys have got a lot of questions tonight. I was used to Mahler. I was used to looking for an emotional kick from music. Right? There's that song Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. Right? That's like Wagner amped up, right? It's taking you on an emotional journey. It's almost hypnotic in the way it hits you, and it takes you one place and it takes you another, and then it climaxes with you, and then it lets you down. I mean, it's very, very, very potent emotional stuff. And if you're listening to music and wanting it to be like that, you kind of miss the beauty of classical music. That when I listen in the morning when I wake up, or at night when I go to sleep, to Beethoven, to Bach, or to Mozart, I'm not wanting it to emotionally punch me. I'm not wanting to get on a roller coaster and be taken, right? I'm not looking for the familiarity and the strong melody of a folk song. I'm looking for patterns. Because that's the beauty of Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, Haydn, right? Is that they are messing with patterns, right? It is almost mathematical, the music. The way things are going around, the way the notes are going is almost mathematical. And instead of looking for an emotional punch, I'm following in my mind where the notes are going and the intricacies and the patterns of it. And I'm thinking analytically as I listen to the music. And it has a very, very different effect on your mind, right? You go to a rock concert, you go to a Wagner opera, you're just, wow, you're emotionally blown away, you're hypnotized, you're rolling. But you listen to Bach, you listen to Beethoven, you listen to Mozart, you listen to Haydn. It has a totally different effect on you psychologically. And it gives you the ability to think more with a clear head. And it gives you the ability to appreciate patterns in the world. And so I will tell you, my ability to get things done, my ability to interact with people in an effective way, my ability to make clear decisions has vastly improved because of this ritual that I do every day, listening to Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, Handel, sometimes Handel, by listening to the patterns of the music, not the emotional punch, but the patterns. I've discovered that I can train my mind to think in a more clear, analytical way. And it has brought me a lot of happiness. It has brought me a lot of happiness. So that is the first thing I wanted to talk to you all about, was music. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk to you all about, as part of my special Christmas Day ramble on YouTube here, I wanted to talk to you all about exercise, right? Now, I am not an athletic person. I never have been a very athletic person, right? I was not good in gym class in school. I was often picked last in elementary school when we'd be picking teams for dodgeball and kickball and soccer and gym hockey or whatever we were playing that week. I was never very athletic, and I kind of hated sports. I always thought sports were, dumb, sports were boring. So I never liked sports, right? I did run cross country in junior high. I ran, I did cross country running in junior high, and I did play a year of soccer when I was a freshman in high school. But I never really liked athletic culture. I was never athletic. And then, I've always been, my family, we've always been people that are kind of underweight, right? Now, I had some health changes in high school that resulted in me gaining some weight, but overall, my family have largely been underweight. You look at my long, bony fingers, I mean, it's just, especially my mother's family, we're underweight, we're skinny people. So, based on that, I never was feeling like I needed to exercise in order to, in order to keep my weight, in line or anything like that. So I just never got into a habit of exercising. In college, they had a gym, a rec center where any student could go work out, but I didn't. I didn't do that. I just, I sometimes I worked at the rec center. I had a job working there, sometimes, but I never actually started working out because I just had no desire to do it. It seemed boring, whatever. Never got into the habit of exercising. And then, when I was an activist, in New York City, I was go, go, go. I mean, I would work at the insurance company, and then at night I would go protest, or I'd go to a demonstration, and we'd march halfway around the city. So I was always kind of doing, energy intensive activities with my activism. And so I never really thought of that. AOC Tibet. Never really thought about exercising. But, the job I have now, I spend a lot of time sitting at my desk, just kind of sitting there, doing things, writing scripts, sending emails, writing ideas, interacting with people. I do a lot of things where I just sit at my desk. And I noticed that when I had a job where I was just sitting at my desk, I started to gain a lot of weight. I mean, I wasn't getting fat or anything, but I gained weight because I was just kind of sitting at my desk. And I'm a very excitable person, right? So I was just sitting at my desk. And it occurred to me at one point, I said, maybe I could, lose some weight, start going to the gym, exercising. And on top of that, maybe this feeling I have all day, like I'm tired of sitting at my desk, if I actually went out and exercised, I could get some of that shaky feeling, that not wanting to sit still all day feeling out. So I was very nervous, I remember. And why was I nervous? I was like, it didn't make sense at first, but, I went to the gym, signed up, became a member of the gym that I'm a member of, got my bag, got my athletic clothes, got my lock for my gym locker, got my athletic shoes, and was all ready, and I was very nervous before I first walked into that gym. And I walked into that gym, I'm like, all right, I'm going to work out, I'm going to feel better, I'm going to be less jumpy, I'm not going to gain weight because I'm just sitting around the office all day, I'm going to do this. And I walked into the gym, and I was blown away. It was the most laid-back environment. It was just chill. Everyone there was doing exactly the same thing I was doing. They were there to exercise. So was I. No one looked at me. No one said anything to me. I was there to exercise. They were there to exercise. It was just the most meaningless, benign activity ever. And what had I been nervous about? Well, I had it in my mind that I was going back to the high school locker room, that this was gym class again. This was high school athletics or something, and I was going to be in a locker room full of guys ready to fight. And no, that was all in my mind. And I realized that had probably been a barrier that had kept me from exercising in the past, is that I had associated exercising with this kind of male adolescent competitiveness, jock culture or something like that. No, I just, I went in, I exercised, and I loved it. And I found it very refreshing, and I could shower at that point after I exercised. So to have a shower in the middle of the day was very refreshing, right? You're sweating, and then you go and you shower, I just found it to be a really meaningful, peaceful thing to do. And so to go exercise, take some time, to go exercise during my lunch hour or whatever, was just a really meaningful thing to do. And I really, really benefited from it. And I had in my mind that it was going to be this painful process, that there was going to be this toxic masculinity there was going to be this negativity, there was going to be this judgment, all the guys there would be super huge men who would see that I wasn't a super huge man and go, ah, ha, ha, you're no good. No, none of that. Nothing. I mean, it was just the most chill, relaxing thing. And that made me realize that often, we put things in our head. There are things that are blocking us, sometimes that we're not even aware of. I wasn't aware of why I was so nervous to go exercise. I didn't know why. I just had it in my mind it was going to be this very, very painful thing. And when I walked in and everyone's just like, hey, all right, yeah, okay, whatever. Yeah. No one said anything. I realized that this anxiety I'd had about going to exercise was in my subconscious, right? It was a subconscious fear that had been embedded in me growing up. And I thought that was very interesting. And I still exercise. Now, the gyms are still open in New York City during the pandemic. They're at 25% capacity. But now, I don't always get a chance to go every day. I try to go 5 times a week. In a week of 7 days, I try to go 5 times. If I can't go 5 times, on the days that I'm unable to go, I've discovered that I can exercise from home. Right? There are these half-hour workouts you can do, and they even have half-hour quiet workouts, apartment-safe, quiet workouts that you can do from home. You sit there and there's this beautiful woman and she says, all right, now punch, now jump, now kick. And you just follow the lady on the screen and, you punch and you kick and you do one-arm planks and push-ups and you just follow the beautiful lady on the screen and she, and you can work out from home. So I do that. I do a half-hour workout from home if I can't go to the gym. And I'll tell you, it has been amazing, right? And especially in this pandemic, I go and run in the summer times. I've gone running, right? I've when the gyms were all closed, when the height of the lockdown over the summer, July, June, I would just, I would put my headphones on and I would go run around the block, and it gives you something to do. I am not an athlete, folks. I am not an athlete by any means. I'm in decent shape, but I'm not, I don't claim to be, somebody, who's got huge abs or something like that. I don't need that. I'm working out for me, for nobody else but me. I am working out for me, for my own satisfaction, because I want to, right? For the same reason that I wake up in the morning, every morning, with classical music, with Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, Haydn, the same reason I do that is also the same reason I work out. I don't work out for anyone but me. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm not trying to keep in shape out of fear of getting someone else's approval. I work out because I want to work out. And my ability to do that has also made me happy. And if you can get yourself into a state of mind where you work out because you want to work out, because you work out for you, it is something that you want to do. You keep in shape for yourself. If you can do that, you'll be happier. I'm convinced. Now, another thing I wanted to quickly mention while we're in our opening remarks, and we're talking about things that can help us get through this difficult world, is that words give you power. Now, that might sound wacky, right? And no, I'm not talking about The Secret, right? This is not The Secret. Words do not create reality, okay? I'm not here to tell you language defines reality, ideas define reality. I reject idealism and philosophical idealism in favor of dialectical materialism. So no, you don't think, therefore you are, therefore you think. Thought is inseparable from matter that thinks. But words can give you power. Words can give you power. There's a reason that I end these lives the same way every time. Do you folks remember? If you're a loyal watcher of this program, you'll probably be able to recite these words with me while I say them. But if you're a loyal watcher of this program, you know that I end the broadcasts every time like this. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And then I repeat the last stanza. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Those words have strength. There's a reason that I put them to memory. I put them to memory because they give me strength. When I hear those words, it is a refreshing feeling, right? Those are words that have particular meaning to me. And so I've made a point of memorizing them, getting them exactly right, and reciting them to myself, right? If you're in a moment where you're trying to focus, you're trying to get through things, I will find myself muttering those words under my breath. I'll be sitting there and I'll be muttering, ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launched. I'll do that because those words bring me strength. I have found certain words that bring me strength, and I repeat those words, and that is something that one can do, right? There's also another particular passage from William Shakespeare that I have put to memory, and it also brings me strength. It goes like this: I have of late, but wherefore I know not, lost all my mirth. This goodly frame, the earth to me, is but a sterile promontory. This most excellent canopy, the air, look you, the brave o'erhanging firmament, the majestic roof, fretted with golden fire, seems to me nothing but a foul and pestilent congregation of vapors. What a piece of work is man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and motion, how express and admirable, in apprehension how like an angel, in acquiescence how like a god, the beauty of the world, and the paragon of animals, right? Those are powerful words. And by remembering those powerful words, I can draw strength from them. And I encourage you to do this. Don't, find what words that are good for you. Find passages from Marx, from Lenin, from Mao, right? The reason there's a little red book is those passages in the little red book are to be memorized. That's why they're there. They are to be memorized, right? That's why there are little quotations there, right? That's why Mao spoke in the language of the 5 great thises and the 10 great thises, that's, and, these things are meant to be memorized. This is a thing that people used to do. It's fascinating. If you read Edgar Snow's book, Red Star Over China, he talks about the Red Army camp that he visited, where he met Mao Zedong in 1937. He talks about the Red Army camp. You got to think, right? China, you think your life is hard now? Well, I mean, it's not to say your life isn't hard, right? All of us have hardship and struggling, some of us a lot more than others. But if you think your life is hard, imagine if you were living in China in 1937. You want to talk about trauma, you want to talk about pain, you want to talk about loneliness, you want to talk about hunger and starvation and suffering. Yeah, 1937 China was not the ideal time. Right? A lot of pain in the world. But Edgar Snow talks about the Red Army camp that he visited, where he met and interviewed Mao Zedong. Edgar Snow is the American journalist, the first person to ever interview Mao Zedong. And he talks about how at this Red Army camp that he went to, every second they were singing. They were constantly singing. All the time. There was not a moment of silence in this Red Army camp because they were singing all the time, right? And you listen to those old Communist Party songs, right? The Chinese Communist Party, right? I won't sing them to you because I would sing them in English and they're not in English. But you'll go back and listen to, without the Communist Party, there would be no new China, what is it? The East is red. What else is it? There's, Golden Mountain in Beijing. There is Socialism is Good. These songs all have this kind of happy feel to them. So you imagine, you read in Edgar Snow's Red Star Over China, right? They even had a special song. You can Google this. It's actually one of the popular marching songs of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. It's called The 8 Rules of Attention. The 7 rules of discipline and the 8 rules of attention. And it's just the rules of the military written to music, right? The tune is very catchy. It's, what is it? The tune is, it's a rather catchy tune. It's bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, 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 bum. It's the 3 rules of discipline and the 8 rules of attention. And you listen to it, and it's nothing but the rules of the People's Liberation Army written to music. You listen to it, right? And so, there's a reason, though. When Edgar Snow visited this camp, he was just blown away by all these communists, right? They're growing their own food, they're doing military practice, they're having ideological classes, and it's like there's not a second that goes by that they're not singing. Why? Why are they doing that? It's because those words that they were singing had power. Right? It's fascinating. Very, very fascinating. CPUSA Musicians Organization had 5,000 members in the 1940s. The importance of this used to be common knowledge. Very good point. Very, very, very good point. And they were singing. They were singing because the words they were singing had power. And by putting those words to music, people could remember those words. And those words would stick with them, and those words had strength. Right? This is pretty basic, right? You can go back thousands of years. This is why people had hymns, right? This is why these things existed. By putting words to music, you can more effectively remember them. And if you can remember a powerful passage of politics or religion or ideology, it gives you strength. You can draw strength from those words. You can draw strength from those words. Now, I wanted to just tell you something. And this is what I want to let you in on. And this is a little more political than my talk about music or exercise or drawing strength from words. And this is something that you need to understand. And if you want to know why it is that the suicide rate is so high right now, if you want to know why it is that people are getting addicted to opioids right now, if you want to know why it is that from young Americans, especially from Zoomers, you just get this sense of a hopelessness, right? People call them Zoomer Doomers. Why is this? What is this about? Well, I'll tell you what it is. I am convinced that this is what it is. There is no ideology. Now, I know people are going to go, oh boy, there we go. There's a stereotypical answer from a commie. Oh, there's no ideology. Oh boy. Yeah, here we go. Ideology solves everything, doesn't it, Caleb? Well, hear me out. Hear me out, friends. Hear me out. Folks, I want you to imagine that you're driving down the highway. You're driving down the highway. Maybe you don't drive, so you're riding your bike down the road. You're driving down the highway. When you're driving down the highway, you know where you came from. You know where you're going. On top of that, you know how fast you can go. You know the speed limit. You know what your next turn is going to be. And so you keep driving. Pretty straightforward. Now, it may be at some point when you're driving down the road that, your destination changes. You thought you were going one place and you say, you know what? I'm not going to go that place. I'm going to go to another place, right? I'm going to change the direction we're going, change the route, change the speed. But you still know where you're going. You still know how you're getting there. You still know what speed you're going on. You just changed your destination. But now I want you to imagine you're driving down the highway. All of a sudden, you can't remember where you came from. You can't remember where you're going. You don't even know how fast you're supposed to be driving. Now, if you were in a situation where you were driving down the highway and you did not know where you were going, you didn't know where you were coming from, you didn't even know how fast you were going to drive, you know what you would probably do? Stop the car. That's what I would do if I were driving down the highway and I didn't know where I was going, didn't know where I came from, didn't know how I was getting to where I was going. I would jerk to a stop. I would jerk to a stop because I wouldn't know where I was going. Folks, ideology is like knowing where you're going, knowing where you came from, knowing how you're getting there. That's what ideology is, right? Ideology is like that. We all need ideology. There's a reason that human beings throughout history have invented religions and philosophical schools and political, ideology. The ideology was invented so that human beings could fulfill that basic need. It lets human beings know where they came from, where they're going, how they're going to get there. It gives you the ability to point to the map and say, I am here. That's what ideology is for. That's what ideology is for, right? It is the reason. It's when you're driving down the road of life, why you're going, where you came from, etc. That's what ideology is. And the reason we're having a problem now is because of this. This is why we're having a problem. I am going to tell you why there is a mental health crisis in the United States right now. I'm going to tell you why the suicide rate is through the roof, why drug addiction and alcoholism are through the roof. I'm going to tell you why it is. I'm going to tell you the very simple reason that this is happening. This is why it's happening. During the Cold War, in the 1950s, Cold War is going on. And, we had our ideology. And the Soviet Union and the communists had their ideology. They were competing ideologies. There was the ideology of Marxism that said the working class is struggling to rise up and seize control of the means of production, fight for justice, eventually get to a stateless, classless world. There was the ideology of the United States that said the free market and hard work is the answer, and the West is the best, and democracy and liberty and individualism and Christianity, etc. There were competing ideologies. And among sections of the population that were suffering, like African Americans, like low-income workers, there were a lot of people, not a lot, but some people, who said, you know what? I don't like where I'm going. I don't like where I came from. Thank you, Mike. I don't like where I'm going. I don't like where I came from. I'm changing the destination. We're going this way. Going this way. And that worked fine for them, right? They were driving this way. Didn't work. So they changed destination. They started driving another way. That was a bit of a problem for the American imperialists. It was a bit of a problem for the CIA. It was a bit of a problem, right? Now, they knew in the 1950s we had a booming economy, but they feared that, hey, what if there's a big economic crisis? What if there's big rebellions? Could we get to a situation where all the working people of the United States stop driving our way and start driving the other way? How do we stop this? How do we keep them from changing direction? How do we keep them from switching ideologies? That was what they discovered. They said, how do we make sure that if there's a crisis, if there's an economic and political crisis in the United States, if people are fighting in the streets, if there's mass unemployment and starvation and people are just determined, how do we make sure that in the middle of a crisis, they don't switch the way they're driving? Here's what you do. You tell them there's no road. You tell them you're not going anywhere. You tell them you're not coming from any place. Postmodernism. Postmodernism is a way to guarantee that if people don't like where they're going and don't like where they came from, they don't switch. That's what's happening right now. We have entered the age of postmodernism. Postmodernism is not Marxism. Jordan Peterson is an idiot. Anyone who tells you that postmodernism is Marxism is an idiot. Postmodernism was invented to subvert Marxism. Marxism is an ideology. Marxism says human history is going to higher modes of production. There's class struggle that's driving human history forward, and eventually that's ideology. Postmodernism says that there is no grand ideology, there is no grand narrative of human history, there is no ideological truth. It's about deconstruction. So we've entered this period. Now you go back to the 1950s. You go back to the 1950s, Americans were pumped full of ideology. Right? Americans were pumped full of ideology. And in school, you were taught that what is it, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and the Pilgrims really loved Thanksgiving, and the Native Americans danced with them, and it was really great. And America's the greatest country in the world. And if you don't think that, you must be crazy and brainwashed, because everybody knows America's the greatest country in the world, and we have the greatest system, and communism is pure evil and slavery, and America is the best. And that's what people were taught in school. Ideology, right? It was the American ideology. Well, fast forward to 2020, 70 years later, that ideology has been debunked. That ideology has been debunked. The United States was founded on genocide of Native Americans. The United States was founded on slavery and the international slave trade. The United States has engaged in brutal, ugly wars around the world that have killed millions of people. The United States is a society that is greatly unequal, where a small group of billionaires and bankers have all the money and the wealth, and most people don't really have influence over how society is set up. The American ideology has been refuted. At this point, most people in the United States don't really believe in the American ideology. They don't. I mean, it's, we're at the point where people realize, you know what? The USA was started by slavery and genocide. The USA is an imperialist country. There is brutal, oppression in this country. There's a lot of suffering in this country. People realize this. But all that leads to is postmodernism. The Trump people, the Trump movement, is desperately trying to hold on to that ideology. That's why the Proud Boys, the white supremacist Proud Boys, what do they chant at all their rallies? West is the best. West is the best. They're trying to pretend that that's not true, that the American ideology is real. Well, they're wrong. It's not true. The American ideology has been debunked. But the creation of the synthetic left and the fake left has led Americans to this new place where, sure, the American ideology isn't true, but all ideologies aren't true. We're at a place as a society where we've stopped, we're not driving one way. We realize that where we came from, where we're going, that's a lie. We don't know it. We don't know it. But the only option we have when we've come to this conclusion is to stop driving, to stop the car. That is what postmodernism has done. Postmodernism has gotten Americans into a situation where they realize that the ideology they grew up with and the ideology that this country is built on is malarkey. But they cannot, in the name of anti-totalitarianism, in the name of freedom of thinking, in the name of individualism, in the name of postmodernism, they can't start driving another place. And in fact, the American ideology has been replaced with this belief that all ideology is totalitarian, all ideology is oppressive, there is no truth, there is nothing to believe in. And if you do believe in those things, you're a sucker. And anyone who tries to convince you to believe in those things is a totalitarian dictator, is a cult leader, is a narcissist, is a predator, is a fascist, is a Nazi. So at this point, a lot of Americans are stopping the car. They're stopping the car. They're just saying, you know what? Okay, well, I can't believe in America anymore. And I can't believe in anything else either, so I guess I just stop the car. Well, I'm here to tell you, folks, the reason I exist, the reason that I'm on YouTube, I am convinced my purpose in life is to be that guy who tells you you don't have to stop the car. I am here to stand against American chauvinism and American imperialist ideology, but also against the synthetic left, against the postmodernists, against the deconstructionists, against the chaos death cult. I am here to say to you, you don't have to stop the car. There is truth in the world. You did come from someplace. You are going somewhere. You came from the greatest class in all of human history, the proletariat. And we, the proletariat, the working class, are going to seize control of the means of production. We are going to reorganize society so that poverty can be eradicated, so that scarcity can be eradicated. We are going to have a rationally organized economy so that we can get to a higher mode of production. We're coming from someplace and we're going someplace. Human history is marching onward. You don't have to stop the car. We realize that America is wrong. We realize that American imperialism is wrong, but we don't have to stop the car. There is another road. There is another destiny. There is another ideology. And if you think that makes me a Nazi, and if you think that makes me totalitarian, if you think that that makes me a cult leader, a megalomaniac, a narcissist, you go ahead and think that. But I'm here to tell you, you don't have to stop the car. There is truth in the world. There is a way out of this nightmare that we are living under. There is a historical mission that you can be part of. There is right, there is wrong, and that essentially history has offered us a challenge. We, the working class, the greatest class in all of history, now have the job of eradicating the system that puts profit above people. We have the task ahead of us of ending the system of chaos and free markets and putting the people in control. And we carry with us a legacy full of great successes. It was us who turned Russia and China into superpowers. It was us who invented space travel. It's because of us and our ideology that Cuba has a small island, has a medical system that's admired all over the world. It's because of us and our ideology that Egypt is fully electrified. It's because of us and our ideology that Libya once had the highest life expectancy in the African continent under the leadership of Muammar Gaddafi. It's because of us and our ideology that China is the second largest economy in the world and has raised hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. It's because of us. It's because of us that so many great achievements for humanity have taken place. We carry with us the legacy of the greatest historical project in all of human history, the project to transform society, end exploitation, and build a world without suffering and coercion, the struggle to end the rule of profits and unleash human creativity to higher bounds than ever before. That's us. So you don't have to stop the car. You do not have to stop the car. As J. Mary London says, reject the Malthusian ideology, the gospel of despair. You don't have to stop the car. You don't have to stop believing in things. You don't have to enter this postmodern identity crisis, this existential angst. You don't have to go there, right? The lies of American empire are false. So just take a nice U-turn. You know, tell the GPS system to redirect, change of destination, and keep driving smooth down the road. Smooth down the road. The synthetic left, they don't want to do that. They were created to make sure that you don't do that. But I am here I am here to rescue socialism. I am here to restore Marxism. And because of that, I am not going to shut up. Not going to shut up, folks. Not going to go away. As much as they harass me, as much as they spread lies about me, as much as they might, suppress me on social media, as much as they might actually get to the point, where they take me down, right? This could happen. I anticipate that in the next 2 years, this YouTube channel will probably be taken down. I don't care. I ain't going to stop. I'm not stopping. And you shouldn't stop either. You and I are on a mission. We're going to keep going. We ain't stopping. We ain't stopping anytime soon, folks. So please, by all means, get in touch with what I do. Keep coming back to this channel. Keep engaging with the conversation. Find out about the Center for Political Innovation and the great work that we're doing. We're having another web conference this coming Sunday. A lot of good music, a lot of good presentations. Help me, coming out of this pandemic, build an in real life IRL movement, an organization of people. Build a socialist community, a grouping of people that are dedicated to these ideas and dedicated to making it happen, because it is going to happen, folks. It is going to happen. Look what's going on with Crystal Ball right now. Jimmy Dore, they're ahead. It's happening. The subterranean fire is coming to the surface. It's happening, folks. It's happening. I'm here to help you along the way. I'm here to tell you stories and sing you songs and give you lovely broadcasts like this. Write some lovely books, tell some stories. That's what I'm here to do. You will find out what role you play in all of this. You'll gradually figure it all out. I feel like I've figured out the role I'm going to play, and I'm playing it right now as I talk to you. But, the Internationale, the communist anthem, the Internationale, right? Many people, there's many versions of it, many versions of the first verse, but in the American version of the second verse of the Internationale goes like this. We want no condescending saviors to rule us from the judgment hall. We workers ask not for their favors. Let us consult for all, to make the thieves give up their booty, to free the spirit from the cell. Each must themselves decide their duty. They must decide and do it well. Now, first of all, what does free the spirit from the cell mean? Right? That's an important line. To free the spirit from the cell. What does that mean? That means that all the restraints put on human creativity right now, all the restraints put on technological and scientific progress, all the restraints put on human kindness and compassion can be unleashed. That socialism aims to free the spirit from the cell, not just to redistribute the means of production, right? Not just to make the thieves give up their booty, but to free the spirit from the cell. This is what the pessimistic death cult doesn't understand. It's not just about, redistribution, equalizing incomes or something like that. It is about changing the mode of production so that we can free the spirit from the cell. That's what it's about. It's about releasing the artificial restraints put on human creativity and brilliance so that the creative abilities and the manufacturing capacity and the ability to engage in human progress and technological progress can expand, to free the spirit from the cell. And each must decide their duty. They must decide and do it well. Meaning that the role that you play in this is something that you have to figure out, right? No party boss can come along. No organization can come along and say, this is what you will do. No. At the end of the day, you, and only you, can ultimately make the decision of what role you are going to play in the great project for the emancipation of all humanity. Only you can make that decision. But you must decide and do it well. And that ends my opening remarks. Now, I see someone says, last year I survived a self-inflicted attempt on my own life. 1 year later, I have found meaning in this madness. Thank you, Caleb, for reaching out to me. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm deeply moved to hear that. This, trust me, if it weren't for this, I don't know where my life would be. This is what gives my life meaning. And I am here struggling for a new world. And I can't imagine doing anything else, honestly. So if this gives you meaning, if this gives you a purpose in life, great. And I'm glad you're here with us. And trigger warning, I guess, because that is certainly an intense topic. If anyone is contemplating suicide, they should immediately contact a mental health professional. Call 911 or contact a mental health professional immediately. Thank you for the super chat. But that said, this does give meaning to life. I'll tell you that. This gives you something to wake up in the morning to feel good about. So we talked about classical music. We talked about exercise. We talked about words that can give you power. And I mean that about words that give you power. Words can absolutely give you power. Yes, we're doing something special here, folks. We're going to rescue socialism from the synthetic left. We are going to present a way forward, and we are going to save humanity from capitalism. And what better purpose could there be? I can't think of one. All right, folks. So on that note, I do, appreciate you all being here. Merry Christmas to those who celebrate Christmas, like myself. My wife and I had a lovely Christmas dinner. And for those of you who are not celebrating the Christmas holiday, happy holiday for whichever holiday you celebrate. And on top of that, while we're at it, Happy New Year. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. And we've got a lot of super chats to get through, but that's okay. You all are a generous community that want to hear a lot of what I have to say, and I do not have a time limit tonight. I could keep going all night. We could keep going till the sun comes up for all I care, right? I'm having a holly jolly Christmas with all of you. So on that note, names and locations, I will call you out as I see you. Roll call. Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Long Island, New York, Will Lotz. Henderson, Nevada. Orange, Australia, David Fox. Oakland, California, Ryan. Belize. Cincinnati, Ohio, Jenny Lynn. The entire Schilling family in Billing, Montana wishes you a Merry Christmas, Caleb. Great. Thank you, Mikey. Canada. Mo in Toronto. Brian Schaefer in Illinois. David in Italy. Starcraft fellow New Yorker. Very good. Cleveland Pirate Alex. San Jose. Alberta, Canada. Sidonia Mars, LA, California. Kathy in Boston, Massachusetts. Los Angeles, Sam Levin. Puragas, Los Angeles. Nassau County, very good. Greater Toronto area, very good. Thanks, Caleb. Best wishes for you and your family. Upstate Raider. Caliph, Darwin, Australia. Union, New Jersey. Sidonia Mars. Ramiro is in Queens, New York. Auckland, New Zealand. Stephen Clearly. Brooklyn, Washington is love. Little Falls, New Jersey. Salem, Oregon. Manitoba, Canada. China, Fuzhou. New York, very good. Incheon. I think, is that in Korea? Dallas, Texas. Kentucky. Kieran from San Diego. Will in Fresno, California. The mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, says Boris. San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. At the third shift. Ohio, says Classic Alex. Hello, comrades, says Will Lotz. Frank says Silicon Valley. Hello, welcome, Frank. Turtle Island, very good. Syracuse, New York. Mohsin from Iran. Harry in Melbourne. Yucca Valley, California. Great live stream tonight. Very inspiring, says Kieran Fatima. Very good. Clarksville, Tennessee. Brazil. Right? Alex Giovanni in Salem, Oregon. Fresno, California. Juan from Mexico. Vicksburg, Mississippi. very good. Las Vegas, very, very good. Hey Raider, Shanghai, China, Islamic Republic of Iran, happy birthday of Jesus, peace be upon him. Merry Christmas, Mr. Maupin from the Kimya, very, very good. Maryland, hello from the Philippines. Kendall in San Diego, very, very good. Michigan, very, very good. Sofa King, Alberta, Canada. Corona, California, Space Communist. Camino, California. Merry Christmas from Florida, says Harold Sullivan. The Boonies of West Virginia, says Redneck Red. Nate from Sydney, Australia. Irara, Brazil, very, very good. Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Connecticut. Terre Haute, Indiana, very good. Merry Christmas to you and yours, says Charles Rogers. All right, Arkansas, California, Vancouver, Canada, Scotland. Ash from Giotto, very, very good. Giotto. All right. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, says Mr. McFlugs. Chicago, Sammy N. is in Chicago. Who else is with us today? Don't feed the trolls, folks. If someone's in here saying racist stuff or whatever, ignore them, please. Western Sahara, very good. Hamra, Western Sahara. Karl Marx DDR, very good. Somewhere in petty bourgeois suburbia. Sicilia, Italia, very good. Rohan, of course. Orange County, the Netherlands, Joanne, very good. Vegas, baby, says Adam M. Very, very good. Very, very, very good. Jenny Lynn is doing her job as always. She's a much appreciated member of the community and an admin. Ahmad, Wisconsin, says Sam. Denver. What is it? Bel Air, Maryland. Germania, very good. Very, very good. Germania. Very good stuff. Very good stuff. All righty, folks. All righty. Alrighty, so now I have to get through all these super chat questions that you all asked me. Alrighty, so we have Paul Wellstone. Right? Someone is suggesting that they believe that U.S. Senator Paul Wellstone was assassinated. Well, Wellstone was a bit of a progressive. He was on the left wing of the Democratic Party. He died in a plane crash shortly following 9/11. I have never seen any evidence that it was an assassination, but this person, perhaps they have some information that we don't have. I mean, it was particularly, sad at the time when it happened. I do remember when Paul Wellstone died, so that's quite interesting. All right, the Historically podcast. That is Isha, right? And they are a podcast that criticizes Western capitalism, refutes a lot of the lies about the Soviet Union. I have interacted with them on Twitter. They seem to do good stuff. We don't always agree with each other, but that's fine. That's totally fine. And she's been under attack by the same people that I'm under attack by, so that tends to make me think positively of her. And I agree with a lot of what she says. So there you go. All right. Where would CPI get funding? Good question. That is a conversation that we as a group are having, right? We have to figure out how to fund an organization. With any organization, you have to figure out how to do it. Obviously, there are things like conferences. Obviously, there are things like membership fees and donations. Obviously, there are things like book sales. But at the end of the day, right, all of that's not enough. So we got to figure out how to fund our organization and how to fund the work that we do as the Center for Political Innovation. And that's going to be an important conversation. And if you want to be part of that conversation, you need to get involved with the Center for Political Innovation and be in on that conversation of how we can fund our movement. Very good question. I'm glad you're thinking that way, Space Communist, because that is a very important question to ask. All right. Why are Trotskyist organizations popular in the U.S.? I wouldn't, it's interesting. I don't think they actually are. Britain, they have a big problem with Trotskyite groups. Britain has more Trotskyites than ever. At one point, the Trotskyites ran the Liverpool City Council in Britain during the 1980s. The British Labour Party has like a ban on Trotskyites, and there's been a whole history of Trotskyites secretly infiltrating the British Labour Party. Britain seems to have a much bigger Trotskyite problem than the United States does. One thing that I think is hilarious is if you go to the Global South, you don't have Trots. There are some exceptions, right? In Latin America, you'll get some Trotskyist groups. In India, there are a couple. In Pakistan, there's a couple Trotskyist groups. But other than that, you don't have Trotskyist groups. Is it necessary to join a communist party? All right. Very good question. Necessary. But yeah, Trotskyism is a particularly first world trend, right? There's a lot of French Trotskyites, a lot of Italian Trotskyites, a lot of German Trotskyites. The USA, we have them. I would say they're kind of in decline. For a while it seemed, throughout my entire political development, the biggest Marxist leftist group in the United States was called the ISO, the International Socialist Organization. ISO, and they had the Socialist Worker newspaper, and they had Haymarket books, and they were called the ISO. In fact, I'll never forget, I had a professor in college, a history professor, and he was from Tennessee, and he had this beautiful aristocratic Southern accent. He said, "Young man, you really ought to join the ISO. You seem like a dedicated young Marxist. If I was your age, why, I would join the ISO. When I was your age, I was on a college campus, and I joined the ISO, and it was spectacular. For 2 whole years, I was a member of the ISO. I sold newspapers, I sold books, I was part of the ISO. It is spectacular. You ought to join the ISO." It was hilarious, right? It was this guy, and, a lot of old people that have, were communists briefly will have very positive, glowing memories of back when they were communists. But for years, I remember the ISO, the Trotskyite ISO was like the biggest group on all the campuses. Where's the ISO now? They're gone. They're gone. I mean, they dissolved. I mean, they no longer exist. Haymarket books, which is how the money, was handled. They still exist, and I guess they exist as kind of a faction in DSA now. But yeah, the ISO. There were rape allegations, and it fell apart. There is no more ISO now. The ISO, they always rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, I didn't agree with their pro-imperialist politics, and I remember the first time I ever encountered them. I remember I was a senior in high school. That was 2006. There was a big upsurge of immigrant demonstrations that were happening at the time against an anti-immigrant bill, the Chuck Schumer bill. So I remember I was at the Ohio State Capitol building in 2006. There was a crowd of thousands of immigrant workers, and I was there with a Maoist group, and the ISO was there, and they had a table. I went over to the ISO table, and I bought a copy of the Socialist Worker, and I bought it, and I opened the front of it, and in it they had their 5 main points or whatever, their 3 main points or their 10 main points. They had like their statement of principles or whatever, their main points. One of them was, I'm paraphrasing, it said, the Soviet Union, China, Cuba, Russia, right, Vietnam, it listed every socialist country, and it said, had nothing to do with socialism. These were state capitalist regimes. And I just, shut the paper, and that was all I wanted to hear from them. That was it. That was in their statement of principles. All these countries had nothing to do with socialism. And I thought, okay, my whole life I've been told socialism failed everywhere it's ever been tried, right? And I learned that that's a big fat lie. The Soviet Union had tremendous achievements. I learned about the great achievements the Soviet Union engaged in, not only in terms of industrializing the country and defeating the Nazis, but also supporting the civil rights movement in the United States and the labor movement. And for them to say, as one of their main points, had nothing to do with socialism, not even that it wasn't truly socialist, but nothing to do with socialism. I thought, I have no interest in these people. None. And that was that. They did have at one point, I forget the name of it, they had a book, and it was called like The Few Times When Our Class has Been in Power, or something like that. And it was like historical episodes where briefly they considered the working class to have been in power. Paris Commune, okay, after the Russian Revolution, and then they say it went bad after like 1922. And then it gets weird. Hungary in 1956, they think that like CIA-supported fascist uprising led by Cardinal Mindszenty, that was somehow the workers taking power. Not exactly. Oh, Poland in the 1980s, they talk about Solidarność, and I'm thinking, Really, the CIA-backed, Catholic anti-Semitic labor union, that's workers taking power. It says, like Iran for like 3 months after the Iranian Revolution, before the before the Islamic Republic was declared. I'm like, really? I looked through this book, and it's like all the times the working class has taken power are either like CIA revolutions or just like very brief little episodes. And I was reading this, I'm like, this is absolutely crazy. And ISO always rubbed me the wrong way. But what was interesting is out of the blue, there was something called I remember city council, right? I started to see Socialist Alternative, which was like a Trotskyist group imported to the United States from Britain. SALT, or Socialist Alternative, right? And they had Justice magazine, or it became Socialist Action magazine, or newspaper, and they got Kshama Sawant elected to the city council in Seattle, and that was a big deal. That was a very big deal that a socialist got elected to the Seattle city council. That's a big deal. They had Kshama Sawant, and they seemed to have some energy, and they were really into supporting the labor unions, and they were urging Bernie Sanders to run for president. They had like a petition campaign for Bernie to run for president. They seemed to have some energy. They're gone. Well, I mean, are they even still around? I haven't seen them in a long time. I haven't heard from them. So honestly, I don't think that at this point Trotskyism is really a big deal in the United States. I mean, there might be people in DSA who think they're Trotskyites, but most of DSA are just social democrats, right? But I don't see, I mean, Socialist Alternative, I don't see them. The Spartacist League, they were the big Trotskyite group for a long time. They haven't had an issue with their paper come out since May. They had one little like leaflet that said, "Don't vote for Joe Biden." That was it. I mean, they seem to be gone. The Spartacist League. There's the internationalist clubs, and yeah, are Trotskyists still a thing? I guess, I meet them on the internet. I meet like kids on the internet who think they're Trotskyists. Is there actually Trotskyist groups? The premise of the question is, why is Trotskyist groups so popular in the United States? I don't think they're popular. I mean, I think that DSA is popular, but DSA, when it gets down to it, they're just classical social democrat, Michael Harrington, State Department socialist. That's who runs the group. It's an open tent. Anyone can join it, and I encourage people to join it because it's a great place to meet people. But honestly, I don't, I don't think Trotskyists are really big anymore. I mean, all the big trot groups that I knew of seem to have fallen apart. I mean, the SWP, it's probably less than 100 members now, selling the militant and working in their meatpacking plant. I mean, Trotskyism ain't a thing very much anymore these days, I don't think. But maybe I'm wrong. Okay, Trotskyites direct worker control. There's not enough direct worker control in China. Well, folks, direct worker control is not the definition of socialism, right? CPI book on Marxism. Yeah, I'll talk about that. I have some thoughts on that. All right. Trotskyists direct worker control in China. Trump's worst legacy. All right. Trump's worst legacy. Alrighty. All right. So, direct workers' control is not the definition of socialism. When you have a centrally planned economy, you can't have direct workers' control because you have to centrally plan what is being produced, right? And if you have direct workers' control, every factory can do whatever the hell it wants, right? If you are planning out the economy and you say, oh, we need more tires, and you go to the tire plant, and the tire plant says, we decided we want to make ball bearings, right? Direct workers' control, and you're trying to have a centrally planned economy. You can't have a direct worker control, factory autonomy, and have a centrally planned economy, right? That doesn't work, right? If you're going to eliminate the anarchy of production, right? If you're going to have the means of production function upon a predetermined plan, you're going to have some level of central planning that negates direct worker control. Now, you obviously want workers to have direct, control over, decisions in the workplace, right? Policies, hours, things like that. But as far as what the factory produces, you're not going to have that. It's interesting, during the Cultural Revolution in China, there were some experiments with direct worker control. They had the January Storm, you'll remember, of 1967, where the Red Guards overthrew the Chinese Communist Party and turned Shanghai into the Shanghai Commune, right? And they had, it was like direct worker control of Shanghai. And you'll remember that Mao Zedong stepped in and opposed it. They opposed it, right? Mao Zedong said that this was not effective. There's actually a pamphlet that was published on exercising dictatorship over the bourgeoisie. And Mao Zedong introduced the 3-in-1 combination. And for the remainder of the Cultural Revolution in China, China had what they called the 3-in-1 combination, where they had an elected worker from the shop floor, they had a technician, and they had a member of the Communist Party. And it would be those three people, the 3-in-1 combination, would run the factory. And that's how it worked. I'm sorry, but if you're going to have a state centrally planned economy, you cannot have, you cannot have complete autonomy for every factory. Yugoslavia experimented with this kind of thing, but even they didn't have complete factory autonomy, right? And if you are going to have an economy where profits are no longer in command, you cannot have complete and total factory, autonomy. You just can't. It doesn't work because you obviously have to centrally plan things. Some people are going to have to be told you're producing this, right? They're going to have to. Look, central planning happens under capitalism. Walmart centrally plans a huge corporation in order to make profits for Walmart's shareholders, right? Amazon, great example of central planning, right? All kinds of central planning to make sure that that Jeff Bezos makes a lot of profits, right? That central planning, this is one of the biggest myths. You'll hear this from the free market people. Well, no one could possibly plan what everyone needs. It's impossible to have central planning. It's very possible now with computers. Walmart centrally plans, Amazon centrally plans. You name a big major corporation, they are centrally planning the activities of millions of people and millions of machines and products. It is very possible nowadays to centrally plan. So the idea, how could you possibly plan? They do it. Capitalists centrally plan to make profits, right? They centrally plan to advance their own profits, right? We want central planning in which the economy is planned for the benefit of society. That's the difference, right? So don't tell me central planning is impossible. It's not. And it's very possible. It's just, we want central planning for the good of society. We want central planning not to serve the profit interests of owners. We want central planning for the benefit of society. But no, we don't want to break up the economy into every local factory doing whatever they want. That would be a nightmare, right? The goal is eventually so much of a surplus can be created that the need for coercion can break down. But yeah, there you go. Was Jesus a revolutionary? Absolutely, Jesus Christ was a revolutionary, if there ever was such a thing. And in fact, some people even speculate that the way the Bible was put together, it was made to downplay how anti-Roman Jesus was, right? You have to remember, right? Jesus Christ was executed by the Roman Empire. He was put to death by the Romans. And that Christianity, you have to remember, so the thing is, right, Christianity, Jesus Christ existed in Palestine, during the time that it was occupied by the Romans. And Jesus was one of many different figures, right? There were the Zealots, and there were many different figures who engaged in anti-Roman, socialistic agitation and organizing against the Romans. Jesus was arguably one of those people. Jesus was executed. He was nailed to a cross and put to death. And it wasn't, however, until Christianity got to Rome that it started to really have an impact. Because you have to remember, Rome was the center of the world at that point. Rome was the capital of the world. It was the empire. It was Pax Romana that ruled the world. And it was Jewish proletarians in Rome, skilled craftsmen mainly, right? There were a lot of Jewish craftsmen from Palestine who moved to Rome. And they were not landowners. They did not own any property in Rome. They were not plebeians or patricians because they didn't own any property. But they were not slaves either, right? They were craftsmen. They were pipe fitters. They were bricklayers. And that Christianity started out as the religion of Jewish craftsmen in Rome. The craftsmen who sold their labor power, they were proletarians, and they were Jews, and they practiced Judaism, and it was because of Julius Caesar that Judaism was even legal in Rome, right? Judaism is a monotheistic religion that says there is only one God. Until Julius Caesar came along, that was illegal. Julius Caesar changed the laws so that the Jews of Rome could practice their religion. And among the Jews of Rome, there were different sects and branches. And there were Greek proletarians. Obviously, there were Iranian and Persian proletarians. There were many people who were skilled craftsmen from the ancient world who were not Romans who moved to Rome. Okay, and in Rome, they did not own any property, so they could not be landowners. But they were not slaves. They were free men who sold their labor power, and they were proletarians. They were the first proletarians, the first working class people. And among the Jews of Rome, there were proletarians, craftsmen, who worshiped Jesus Christ and felt that Jesus Christ was the Messiah, that Jesus Christ had come to the earth. And you'll have to remember that there were early fights in the Christian church about whether or not they should remain a Jewish religion or not. And it was the Apostle Paul who, and this is in the Bible, right? So again, Bible lesson for people who may not be familiar, answering the question from Tom about, Jesus the revolutionary. So the first few books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those are the Gospels. Those are the accounts of Jesus' life. Then after that, you have the book of Acts, which is about the founding of the church, right? And Jesus, after his crucifixion, and, the apostles are being persecuted, and Jesus gathers them, and at Pentecost, he gives them the Great Commission and sends them out to make disciples of all nations, right? And sends them out into the world to spread his message. Then after the Acts of the Apostles, you have all these books of letters, right? Corinthians, Romans, Timothy. All those books of the Bible are polemics, and that is their letters. And they're named after places, mainly. Corinth for Corinthians, Romans for Rome, right? And it's the early Christian church, the followers of Jesus in different cities, were arguing with each other about what it meant to be a Christian. And you have to remember that when Christianity began, it was a Jewish religion. But the Apostle Paul is the one who said they should stop being a Jewish religion. And there is actually a whole thing, because this is going to get a little explicit here, so forgive me, but, in order to become a practitioner of the Jewish religion, you have to be circumcised. If you are a man, right? In order to convert to Judaism, you must be circumcised. And the early Christian church realized they had a little bit of a recruiting problem, because when they would go to Greeks and Romans and others and say, hey, you should adopt our new religion, and in order to do that, you need to get circumcised, there was a little bit of a, maybe not, maybe I'll pick another religion. It was a bit of a recruiting problem. And this is in the Bible. Paul says that one can be circumcised in the spirit, meaning that one does not require an actual physical circumcision. And Paul starts writing about how Christ came for all mankind, not simply for the Jews, right? And Paul takes Judaism, or takes Christianity out of Judaism, right? And that is a big part. If you read those letters, the letter to Corinth, right, the letter to the Corinthians, the letter to the Romans, those letters are basically Paul saying, okay, we started out as a branch of Judaism, we're just going to go mainstream with this. We're going to become a new religion. And that's why those letters are very important, right? They're considered that's why they were put into the Bible to begin with, right? I mean, if you just wanted the origin of the Christian church, you could have the life of Jesus, the Acts of the Apostles, the end. But you have to have all those letters, because they're arguing about what does it all mean. And right, and there were different wings of Christianity, many different interpretations. You have to remember, for the first few hundred years of Christianity, there was no Bible, right? It was an oral tradition. Right? And you have to remember that in Judaism, there is an oral tradition of stories that are told that are not written down. And Christianity, all those fables that Jesus told, they are the oral tradition, right? They're stories Jesus told to make a point, right? But they're not, no one pretends that what's written in the Bible is exactly what Jesus said. And in fact, there's 4 different versions of it, and they use different words each time. In fact, there are even things in the Bible that clearly were not, correct. For example, Nicodemus. There's the famous argument between Jesus and, or I think it's a conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus, right? And Nicodemus and Jesus are talking about being born again. And Jesus is saying to Nicodemus, you need to be born again. And Nicodemus is saying, so am I being born again or born from above? And Jesus is saying, you're being both. What is that about? Well, the thing is, in Greek, the word born again and born from above are the same word. It's a pun, okay? Jesus could never have spoken Greek. Jesus spoke Aramaic. The ancient Jews of Palestine did not speak Greek. So that whole conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus never happened, okay? It's a Greek play on words that somebody along the way, along the 100 years, thought up and threw in to the Bible, right? It's a Greek joke. It's a Greek pun that clearly Jesus, who did not speak Greek, could never have made, right? So throughout, as Christianity is evolving and growing, right, every church, they have their oral traditions of people who actually knew Jesus are saying, and they're passing the story on from family generation to generation, right? So eventually they start writing this down. There's no printing press back then, you have to remember. There's no printing press. So every church starts to have like a scroll in the church with these stuff written down. And it's finally, you have the Council of Nicaea, or Nicaea. I don't know. Some people say Nicaea, some people say Nicaea, where they just decide that there's one book that is the official Bible. And that's when what we call the Bible was selected. But there are many books and many different versions and accounts of the life of Jesus that never made it into the one that got the official blessing as the Bible. And that's what people have to remember. There are many different stories of the life of Jesus that different churches had. And it was really because of Rome, when Rome started making Christianity into the official religion of the Roman Empire. It was only then that we started to get, this is the official Bible. And the point I was making, if you go back to earlier, the point I was making is that many people argue that there are many passages in the Bible that were written to make the point that Jesus was not anti-Roman. And they were written to make that point because of the fact that if you're in Rome and you're worshiping a guy who wanted to overthrow the Roman Empire, that doesn't look too good. You might go to prison. You might get killed, right? So there are a lot of little things in the Bible, in the official Bible that was sanctified by the Roman Church, that tell of Jesus doing things that make him sound like he supported the Roman Empire. For example, right, at one point, Jesus is asked, should we pay taxes? And he says, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Render unto God what belongs to God. Well, what does that mean? I don't know, but he did say, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, meaning support the Roman Empire, right? There's the whole incident that many people attribute a lot of anti-Semitism to throughout the ages, the crowd shouting, crucify him, right? Well, that probably didn't happen because, there is only, from my understanding at that time, the way the Jewish religion was practiced, there was only one legal means of execution, and that was stoning. So for a crowd of Jews to have been chanting, crucify him, that would have been blasphemy because they could only chant, stone him, but they were chanting, crucify him, probably didn't happen. You only got crucifixion in Rome if you had engaged in a rebellion against the Roman Empire, right? The Romans killed all kinds of people. But if you were crucified, right, that meant you probably engaged in some kind of armed rebellion against the Romans, right? So for Jesus Christ, and it is well understood, according to every tradition, that Jesus Christ was nailed to a cross, he was crucified. That indicates that Jesus Christ was probably far more of a revolutionary than the Bible even tells us, right? The Bible is very watered down, so the Romans would approve of it. But he was probably far more revolutionary than we can even imagine, and than we can imagine. The fact that he was crucified. What was probably after the execution of Jesus Christ, what is probably the second most famous crucifixion in the history of Rome? Would be the crucifixion of Spartacus. Right? I bet you didn't know about this. But Spartacus, right? All of the followers, Spartacus was a Roman slave who led a slave revolt. And all of Spartacus's followers were crucified. From Rome to, along the road, they crucified all of Spartacus's followers. Thousands of slaves who had engaged in slave revolts were crucified, because crucifixion was reserved for people who tried to overthrow the Romans. That's why you got crucified, right? People got killed for all kinds of things, but you got crucified for trying to overthrow the Romans. Now, the other thing you have to remember is that while there's all these stories in the Bible of, oh, the Romans didn't want to kill Jesus, but it was the Jews who did it. That's one story that is told, and that probably didn't happen, right? There's the story of, oh, he says, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, etc. There's all these things that indicate Jesus was not anti-Roman. Put all of that aside, right? You put all of that aside. Put all of that aside. There are a couple passages in the Bible that indicate Jesus was not a pacifist. For example, in the book of Matthew, Jesus Christ tells his followers, "Think not that I've come to bring peace to the earth, for I come not to bring peace but a sword. I come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and a father-in-law against his father-in-law. A man's enemies shall be those of his own household." Now, I come not to bring peace to the earth, but a sword. That's a pretty blatant statement that you're not a pacifist, right? That's pretty big, right? You can talk about the times when Jesus Christ is referred to as having the government on his shoulders. Again, if he was a good, loyal follower of the Roman Empire, who the Romans didn't want to execute, but those Jews, then that doesn't add up now, does it, right? The government is on his shoulders, right? And so there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things in the Christian Gospels that indicate Jesus Christ most likely was rallying the peoples of Palestine to rise up against the Romans, and that he was executed for doing this, that he was executed for trying to lead the people of ancient Palestine to fight against the Roman Empire, and that local collaborators with Rome, like the Pharisees, etc., collaborated with the Romans to kill him. That's probably what happened. And the fact that his death was, he was nailed to a cross, for goodness sakes, indicates he probably had a very, very big following in doing so, that he was a martyred revolutionary fighter. Now, many people talk about him driving the money changers out of the temple, and thank you, Ben. And that being an act of anti-capitalist, people, I've seen memes where people say that's Occupy Wall Street, or whatever. That's certainly something, right? He goes to the temple, he says, "You've turned my father's house into a den of thieves," right? His teachings against the rich, that it is easier for a rich man, it is easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get to heaven. There's the Sermon on the Mount where he talks about, I was homeless and you did not feed me, right? I was in prison and you did not visit me. He talks about how, there are many things you can point to of Jesus being what you could call a utopian socialist, right? Jesus clearly didn't believe in dialectical materialism, right? Jesus was not a scientific socialist like Marx. But his followers held all things in common. That's in the book of Acts. That's described. And his followers held all things in common and practiced communism among themselves. That's pretty clear. And it was a utopian socialist movement that aimed to overthrow the Romans and a lot of the local authorities who were collaborating with them. That's what it appears to me. Now, I say this with absolute respect to anyone's religion. There may be people who think that this is completely, I'm completely wrong here. What I'm saying here is completely blasphemous or whatever, and that's on you. I believe religion is a personal matter. It is a personal journey. But I do believe Christ, is my Lord and Savior, and that Christ was a great revolutionary. Christ, did carry with him, the authority of God, and I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. I'm not a strict believer in the Bible, as you just heard. I pointed out to you the Bible was changed and distorted in a lot of ways. I talked to you about how Christianity really came into existence, which was through the Roman Empire. So it's very, very complicated, right? And I'm telling you things that are very, very complicated. And ultimately, religion is not science, right? Let's remember this. In science, there's the scientific method and all this. Religion is not science. Religion is not science. It is not, right? People believe in religions for their own reasons. People believe in religions because they have faith, right? People don't adopt religious beliefs because of, the scientific method. So I'm not here to convince you of anything, but I was asked by Tom, he did super chat me about Jesus the Revolutionary. I gave a very long answer to that question. So there you go. Now, moving on. The COVID news stream in the UK, it scares the crap out of me. I don't know. I mean, I only know what we're all seeing in the media. So that's scary, and that's that. That's all I can say about it. I mean, Nashville explosion. I think it was who was it? It was somebody had a theory about AT&T or something. I don't know anything about what happened. I mean, there was an outage in communications afterwards, from what I understand. So that's pretty intense. All right, breaking up monopolies. Well, this is interesting. Now there was a movement, you have to remember, in the 1900s against the trusts. Right, it was a populist movement against the trusts. So they wanted to break up the trusts. There was a very famous American socialist leader named Daniel DeLeon who opposed that movement. And he said, well, we don't want to break up the trusts. We want to nationalize the big monopolies, right? We don't want to break up big banks. We want to seize big banks. And Daniel DeLeon is right. Now, he framed it in a way, he should have been with the people in their movement against the trust, right? And that's the thing. If there was a progressive movement going on against the big trusts, Marxists should find a way to be part of that movement, but also say the answer is socialism, not breaking up, the monopolies. So, but yeah, I don't want to break up big monopolies. I want, them to be under public control. That's what I want. All right. Why did the DPRK not join the USSR? Well, that's an interesting question, for good reason. You have to remember that Mongolia, right, was always considered an independent Soviet republic, right? That, Mongolia, was not ever considered part of the USSR. It was always considered an independent republic. And the DPRK also, you have to remember, it was not, when it was formed, it was not a socialist country. It was a people's democracy, right? All across Eastern Europe. When China was established, when DPRK was established, they did not declare themselves to be socialist countries. They called themselves people's democracies, right? And that the Korean Workers' Party is actually a merger of three different parties. It was the Communist Party, the Social Democratic Party, and the Christian Party. And they all merged into one party, the Korean Workers' Party. Same in East Germany, the Social Democratic Party, I don't even remember what the other party was, and the Communist Party merged into, and this was the pattern, right? That there was an understanding that in these countries where Soviet troops had liberated the population, that the communist parties were not big enough to represent the entire population. So a merger of anti-fascist parties was formed, right? All the anti-fascist parties were brought together to declare a new government, right? And that eventually these anti-fascist parties merged into, in East Germany it was the Socialist Unity Party, Korea it was the Korean Workers' Party. In China they never merged the parties, right? Now in China there was the Communist Party, but it was also, there was the left KMT Party, the Peasants' Party, others. And they did not declare China was not originally a socialist country. It was a people's democracy. It's the People's Republic of China, not the Soviet Socialist Republic of China, but it was the People's Republic, right? That is something you have to remember. So DPRK, they made a big point, a very, very big point, of not, if they had just declared it to be part of the Soviet Union, that wouldn't have been correct, right? Because it was liberated by Soviet troops, but they wanted to make a point that the people of Korea were not, it wasn't colonialism, right? It wasn't colonialism. That was the point they were trying to make. And that, the Korean people had their leader, Kim Il-sung. They had their parties, the Korean Workers' Party, Juche ideology, and that was what it was about, right? It was, again, that if the Soviets had just declared DPRK to be part of the Soviet Union, that would have just looked like blatant, colonial expansionism on the part of the Soviet Union. But instead, you had the people's democratic process. Romania had this process. Yugoslavia had this process. The people's democratic process of transitioning to socialism. China had this process, right? The Soviet Union was very careful to win the loyalty of the population. That if they had just marched in and said, "You are now part of the Soviet Union," they would have immediately lost support of the population. And there were big problems. There were big revolts in East Germany and Hungary and other places. There were anti-communist, uprisings that took place in the aftermath of the Second World War. So it's that simple, right? And that, the United States had nuclear weapons, and the Cold War was getting going, and the Soviet Union, there were places where they were forced to retreat. Greece is an example, right? Greece, it was communists who defeated the fascists in Greece, but ultimately a capitalist government came into power because the Soviet Union, they weren't ready to, so yeah. Anyway, all right. Okay, Gus Hall and the Little Steel Strike in Ohio. Well, okay, so you have to remember. So there's the reason it's the Little Steel Strike is there was the Great Steel Strike, right? 1919. William Z. Foster led the Great Steel Strike of 1919, and they lost, right? And it was the American Federation of Labor and William Z. Foster, and he was part of the Chicago Federation of Labor, along with Jack Johnstone, and Bill Dunn and others. They led the Great Steel Strike of 1919, and they lost. It was a big steel strike. It was a huge national emergency. National Guard called out. People died on the picket lines. It was a big thing, but they lost the steel strike of 1919. Probably the main reason they lost is racism. Right? The Steel Workers Union was whites only at that point. It was an American Federation of Labor Union, and it was whites only. And because of that, the black community was used as scab labor. Because of the labor unions, black people could not work in the steel mills. And so when the strike happened, the bosses would hire the black people to work in the steel mills. And black people, were very anxious to get jobs in steel mills, which they were locked out of. Steel mills paid better than the jobs that a lot of black people were doing in places like Pittsburgh and Chicago and elsewhere. So, because of the racism of the AFL union, that was a major reason that the steel strike of 1919 was lost. William Z. Foster talks about this, that racism hurts all working people, and it was this racism that caused the Great Steel Strike 1919 to be defeated. Fast forward to the late 1930s, you have something called SWOC, Steel Worker Organizing Committee, and William Z. Foster and Gus Hall and all kinds of communist leaders are in the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, and they are pushing to organize the Steelworkers Union. And they ultimately got to the point that they launched the Little Steel Strike. Gus Hall was involved. I think he went to prison for a little while. I think they accused him of trying to blow up a bridge or something like that. And he talks about how they shot down airplanes. It was an armed struggle in Youngstown, Ohio. It was an armed struggle. It was a pitched battle. And there was, gunfire exchanged and militias, and it was an armed struggle to unionize in Youngstown, Ohio. People died. It was a pitched battle. It was the effort to unionize the steel industry was very, very difficult. People forget this. People, that it drives me nuts. Steve Bannon and these guys will be like, "Oh, we need good paying industrial jobs," right? Well, folks, industrial jobs didn't used to be good paying. They got to be good paying because of communists and because of class struggle organizing. It used to be that people who worked in steel mills and people who worked in textile mills and people who worked in auto plants got paid poverty wages. It's only because of communist struggles that these good paying jobs were good paying jobs, okay? And so the idea that, oh, we need steel, jobs back. We don't need jobs at McDonald's. Why can't they pay people at McDonald's a decent wage? Why can't people at McDonald's have union benefits, right? Well, is there something magical about somebody who works in a steel mill and somebody who works at McDonald's that one should get paid a decent wage and one should get paid poverty wages? No, it's that communists fought very, very hard for people in steel mills, to get paid, the decent wages they got. Well, I think people at McDonald's should make decent wages as well, I think there should be union protections for people in fast food. I think there should be union protections for people in the service sector. Right, and that there's this belief on the part of a lot of right-wing populists, but even left-wing populists, that somehow manufacturing jobs just magically get paid good wages, just magically out of nowhere. It's just hey, and industrial workers on the assembly lines, they just magically get paid good wages, and people who work in food or people who work in the service sector and retail and warehouses, they just don't. And it's just magic. That's just how it works, right? People who drive trucks, they just don't get paid good wages. People who do this, they do. No, right? The reason that workers in industry get paid good wages is because of decades of class struggle and the labor movement. There you go. Alrighty. All right. Advice for creating an ML program in the United States, workers' councils, etc. Well, look, when you talk about a program, right, you're talking about like a thing of action that you would present to people. And you said, we're a communist, what are you for? You give them an answer. Right? That's, you believe in communism, so you believe in, someone says, okay, so you're a communist, what do you believe in? You give them an answer. And they're, generally, there are 3 programs that a communist party will have. They will have what's called the maximum program, which is the working class overthrowing capitalism and seizing power and creating a working class government. That's the maximum program. That's the ultimate goal. Then you have what's called a minimum program, which is things that you're for, like on a basic level, higher pay for working people, end to layoffs, free the political prisoners, basic stuff that doesn't really change society, but you're for it, like, basic stuff. And then between the maximum program and the minimum program, you have what is called a transitional program or transitional demand. And transitional demands are things that are not fully socialism, but are also things that change the nature of society, right? Like the transitional program that I have developed is 4 points. I have said there needs to be a vast reconstruction of the country, a huge mobilization to rebuild the United States of America. There needs to be public control of oil, public control of banking, and an enactment of an economic Bill of Rights, like Roosevelt proposed. Those 4 things I raised, they're not the maximum program. It's not complete overthrow of capitalism. But it's not the minimum program either. Those are 4 things that would drastically change the United States and alter the nature of society. So a communist party, ultimately, or a Marxist-Leninist organization, constantly has to do all 3 of those things. On the one hand, they have to have a basic minimum program, things that a lot of working class people are for, that they can agree with them about, right? Like, hey, people want $15 an hour to be the minimum wage. We want $15 an hour to be the minimum wage. People want there to be an end to home foreclosures and evictions. We want there to be an end to home foreclosures and evictions. And thank you, David, right? That's basic, right? That's the minimum program. And we have to constantly be educating people about the maximum program, which is, the workers rising up and seizing power, overthrow of capitalism, socialist revolution. But in order to really make yourself stand out, you need to emphasize a transitional program. And that is why those four points that I just raised, that is my transitional program, right? Those 4 points, right? And that is the transitional program that I hope that eventually the Center for Political Innovation will formally adopt as our transitional program. A mass program of reconstruction of the country, a mass, a nationalization and public control of all natural resources, oil, gas, timber, coal, public control of the banking system, and an enactment of an economic Bill of Rights. Now, if you took those 4 steps, the USA wouldn't be fully socialist, but at that point, a government that was able to take those 4 steps would be an anti-monopoly government. It would be an anti-capitalist state. It would be a worker and farmer government. And in order to stay in power, if it were to start taking those 4 steps, it would have to move towards socialism. It would have to change the nature of the military. It would have to change the nature of the police. It would have to change the nature of the media, right? That in order to carry out those 4 steps, the USA would have to become socialist. And they are not in themselves socialism, right? Socialism is far more than those 4 steps. But any government that would get into office, that would start to enact those 4 points, would basically, out of necessity, be forced to become socialist. William Z. Foster writes about this. If you read William Z. Foster, he wrote a very good book. He wrote a book called It was called The Twilight of Capitalism, The Twilight of World Capitalism. And in that, he talks about how the Communist Party of the United States, they advocated what they called an anti-monopoly government. And they listed it as a government that would stop engaging in wars around the world, stop engaging in wars around the world. It would stop doing the big work of corporations. It would stop um, protecting big monopolies. It would stop working against the labor unions. It would stop promoting racism. That the idea was that if you had an anti-monopoly government, that it would come under such attack by the military contractors, such attack by the media, the mainstream media, such attack by the educational system, that it would, out of necessity, right? If you had an anti-monopoly government, a government of action that fought for working families, that the only way such a government could survive would be to transition to socialism, right? You'd have to have a new state, a new military, a new policing agencies to protect the state from the big corporations. You'd have to have a new media apparatus that would defend the state from the torrent of lies that would go out. You would have to have a mobilization of the population, and that the enactment of an anti-monopoly government, or at one point the Communist Party called it a worker and farmer government, that in and of itself, is the transition to socialism, right? Now, I want to add that, instead of saying anti-monopoly government, because people don't know what that means. They think, oh, it's a government that's going to get rid of the board game Monopoly. What is this? I play Monopoly. But instead of saying a government, an anti-monopoly government, because that's not, people don't talk about Monopoly now, right? They think it's a board game or whatever. I say a government of action that would fight for working families. And then I list the 4 steps that a government of action that would fight for working families would have. That is my transitional program for the United States. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. And what a government of action would do is to enact those 4 policies, right? And that is a transitional program. And I'm for the maximum program of full socialism. And I'm also for the minimum program of protecting the working class and from the attacks. So that's where we're at. This is how you formulate a communist program. And I hope that that's clear to the person who asked the question. All righty. Okay. All righty. Optimism for Venezuela. Look, if Venezuela can get through everything they've been through in the last few years, they've been subject to so much economic warfare, like food shortages were created by the imperialists. Plots to overthrow the government. If Venezuela can survive what it's been through so far, I'm very optimistic about their future. Right? China is ready to protect them. Russia is ready to protect them. They are developing a very good relationship with the Islamic Republic of Iran right now. I'm very optimistic about the future of Venezuela. If they can survive everything they've been through, it is far better now than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So I am very optimistic about the future of Venezuela. Maduro has proved himself, right? Many wondered if Maduro would not be able to fulfill, he was, stepping into some big shoes, with Hugo Chavez. But Maduro has proved that he is very effective. The colectivos and the communes, the movement behind the United Socialist Party is very, very effective. Biden-Maduro talks. All right. So there you go. Is it possible? All right. All right. How can you be anti-imperialist in the United States? Well, first of all, one way to be anti-imperialist is to tell the truth. Here in the United States, we are constantly pumped full of pro-imperialist lies, right? Constantly pumped full of pro-imperialist lies, right? Whether it's Hong Kong separatism or Tibet separatism or Venezuela, Maduro's an evil dictator, or Iran are evil and are trying to get a nuke and kill us all. We have to tell the truth. We have to use our voices to tell the truth. That's one of the most important ways you can be an anti-imperialist. And at your job, at your school, in your community. Be the one who says, no, Iran is not trying to get a nuclear bomb. Be the one who says, no, Venezuela is not starving because of socialism. It's because of the criminal sanctions imposed by the United States on them. And the starvation has largely been fixed in the last few years, but it was because of the sanctions the USA imposed. Be the one who says that Syria is being bombed by Israel right now, and no one talks about it. The USA is funding terrorists in Syria. You have to be the one to spread the truth and tell the truth about what happened in Libya to Gaddafi and to socialism in Libya, and tell the truth about why it is that people are fleeing from Central America, from Guatemala and Honduras. Why are people fleeing? Because of capitalism, right? And what about the achievements of Nicaragua? Racism, big problem on the left. That's one way you can do it. Another way is to build a socialist movement that is actually anti-imperialist, and to fight for anti-imperialist positions in the socialist movement, and fight against the State Department socialists that try to mobilize socialists to be pro-imperialist, like the Jacobinites, right? And like Jabba the Vosh and Skippy the Bear. These are pro-imperialist socialists, right? And it's about, not only fighting among the masses for the truth, but also fighting in the socialist movement, for anti-imperialist positions. All right, and building an effective socialist movement that can actually dismantle imperialism. All right. Dark money to Vosh. I have no knowledge of how Vosh is funded. Okay, so don't. The thing is, right? So it's like, the thing is, it doesn't matter, right? Is it possible somebody bad is giving Vosh money? Sure, it's possible, but at the end of the day, is that what matters? No. What matters is what Vosh is saying. That's what matters, and what Vosh is saying is wrong and bad. And he's got a big audience that he's training to think, that socialism is everything stays the same except, every company becomes a worker co-op, right? So basically socialism is an employee stock ownership program. And the next time, his buddy Biden wants to go invade Iraq, all the workers at Boeing will be like, oh boy, I'll get so much more money. That's great. I got to get a fair share now. Right? I mean, what he's doing isn't good. Why? Talk about why, okay? Speculate about why, right? We know where Jacobin gets their funding. We know where DSA gets some of their funding, but do we know where Vosh gets his funding? No. And does it matter at the end of the day, right? Is it possible, would Vosh get funding from bad people and do good things? Yes. So don't focus on this. This is a distraction, right? And see, if I get on here and I say, yes, I think the government is giving Vosh money, then he can go, and they always say this. This is their classic lie. Jabba the Vosh, Skippy the Bear. Whenever you point out that there is a huge effort to manipulate the socialist movement and make it pro-imperialist, they say, oh, he said that the only reason anybody would not be a tanky is because of... No, that's not what we said. That's not what we said, okay? But they know what they're doing. They're liars, and they love that, right? If you say you're funded by the CIA, if you say... They love that. They just jump on top of it. See, he says the only reason that anybody wouldn't support the government of North Korea is because of CIA money. They're liars, okay? They're liars by nature, and they distort the argument, right? And because they're liars, and that proves that they're liars, right? If they had the truth on their side, they wouldn't have to lie like that. So this is a distraction, right? It's important to talk about what is documented, right? We can talk about what is documented, right? The funding for Jacobin from a pro-Israeli lobby group is documented, right? The funding for DSA from a pro-Israeli lobby group, documented, right? The funding for, the Congress for Cultural Freedom and Susan Sontag and all that from the CIA, documented, okay? Who the hell is funding Vosh? Don't know. Doesn't matter. What matters is what he's saying and why it's wrong, okay? And don't fall into the trap. Don't fall into the trap of giving them that ammo, right? Because they love that, right? If you say to them, you're funded by the CIA and you don't know it, you can't prove it, number one. If you make an accusation like that and you can't prove it, right? They love to just lampoon and make fun. So don't make the accusation. Focus on what they're saying and why it's wrong. And if there's something true you can throw in, to say like why they might be incentivized to say it. If you have actual facts, talk about it. But this culture of you're CIA, no, you're CIA. I mean, I've seen stupid, like I've seen people say Jimmy Dore is CIA because he disagrees with Jacobin. Like, it's like this gets so ridiculous, right? And it's just anyone can accuse anybody else of being CIA. If you don't have any proof, right? And if you don't have any proof, you don't have any evidence, don't say it, right? It doesn't help, right? Anybody can say anything about anybody. Folks, I hate to break it to you. Anyone can say anything about anybody. Doesn't make it true. Did you know that? Anyone can say anything about anyone, right? Now, people can sue people for slander sometimes. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes some people are more credible than others, right? But at the end of the day, right, don't throw out allegations unless you can back them up. And who's funding them is not the issue. The issue is what they're saying, okay? Right? If they were getting funding, let's imagine, hypothetically speaking, let's imagine that Vosh was amazing. That Vosh was just an amazing speaker and writer and was anti-imperialist and really understood Marxism and wasn't a complete buffoon. Imagine that. Imagine that Vosh was just doing great things for the revolutionary working class movement, was just full of truth, and he wasn't, pessimistic, and he wasn't dark, and he wasn't, a jerk, and he wasn't, just imagine a whole different Vosh. But at the same time, he was getting money from the CIA. Would that matter? No. Right? Vosh was doing all the right things, and the CIA was stupid enough to keep paying him to do it. Who cares? Right? Right? Hey, folks, Fidel Castro got money from the CIA at one point. Did you know that? He was winning the revolution in Cuba, and the CIA sat down with him, and they said, oh, okay, great, you're winning. Well, here's some money. The Sandinistas got money from the CIA at one point. They were, the CIA would, noticed that the U.S.-backed dictator in Nicaragua, Somoza, was not very popular. And so they said, oh, geez, there's this other group of communists in Nicaragua that are not part of the pro-Soviet Communist Party, and they gave them money. Well, Fidel Castro took that CIA money, overthrew, Batista, established a socialist government, and gave the middle finger to the Western imperialists. So, does it matter? I mean, not really, right? Sandinistas in Nicaragua, right? They took that CIA money, overthrew Somoza, established a socialist government aligned with the Soviet Union. Well, and does that matter? I mean, the issue is not who gets funding from whom. The issue is someone acting in a certain way, and is that because they are getting money? That's the issue, right? So, at the end of the day, the issue is what people do, not why they do it, or why you think they might do it. Alrighty. Franz Fanon. Folks, Franz Fanon, he's this big name in the New Left, right? Existentialism, psychology, very big among anti-colonial revolutionaries and stuff. I've never been able to get into it. I just can't, I've tried to dig into it many times. I just don't find it to be all that profound. It's not my cup of tea. Huey Newton was very inspired by it, and I respect it. Some people have criticized that it's a little bit ultra-left adventurist, propaganda the deed or whatever. I just can't get into it. That some people call it ultra-left and say it's like Sorrellian, it's influenced by George Sorrell, and it's ultra-left or whatever. I've never been able to dig enough into it to actually get that out of it. I don't really find it that inspiring. I've tried to read Wretched of the Earth. I've tried to read Toward the African Revolution. Just don't find it inspiring. And that for all the existential stuff. I mean, I don't find, the post-World War II, New Left, existential philosophy, Sartre, and, Althusser and all that. Not my cup of tea. Not my cup of tea. Okay, what can we learn from Fred Hampton? Folks should go and watch. There's a documentary called The Murder of Fred Hampton, and it was made by, on the topic of Fanon, was flown to the U.S. by the CIA for cancer treatment. Merry Christmas. Okay, great, Eric. I didn't know that. But, yeah, Fred Hampton, there's a great documentary, The Murder of Fred Hampton, and it was made by the Newsreel Collective, which was a group of Maoists in the 70s, and they made like documentaries. They made a good movie about Detroit. It was called Finally Got the News. It's a very good documentary. And they made The Murder of Fred Hampton. And if you watch it, it's all kinds of footage of Fred Hampton. And what comes across is that Fred Hampton was a communist. Fred Hampton was a tankie. He was a Marxist-Leninist. And he was very good at explaining Marxist-Leninist ideology to people. He was very good at communicating with people. He was also very good at bringing groups of people together and sitting down with people he did not agree with and convincing them to engage with him in common action. He was a very good organizer. If you really want to know who Fred Hampton was, that movie, The Murder of Fred Hampton, a lot of the movie is just footage of Fred Hampton being a community organizer and being effective, and it's really beautiful. I would check it out if I was you. All right. Okay. All right. What does my family think of my politics? Not much. They're not big fans. Not big fans of my politics. And, that happens, right? I mean, look, again, right? What did Jesus say, right? I come not to bring peace to the earth, but a sword, right? For I come to turn a mother against her daughter and a father against her daughter-in-law, and a man's enemies shall be those of his own household. Look, you don't get into this stuff because you want your parents to think you're an upstanding citizen and you're randy dandy and you're all amazing, right? You don't get into this kind of thing because you want to get Son of the Year award from your mom. You don't. I'm sorry, but it's like this kind of thing. You get into this stuff because you believe in it, right? You get into this stuff because you know it's the truth. I don't want to say too many personal things because I'm not on here to discuss my personal life. But, I'm sorry, but it's like this is not, honestly, how do I put this, right? People have different kind of relationships with their family. Some people, their family, I've heard people say I converted my parents. I've heard people say that. I'm like shocked. Like, really? Some people say, oh, my parents are more open to communism. I'm like, wow, okay. And some people have different relationships, right? And people bring their parents to protests and stuff. And, with me, there was always, when I was first, getting into this stuff, when I was in college, when I was in high school, I had this desire that if I could just get my parents to understand that, being a communist is like normal. I could take them to an event and they would meet people and they'd be friendly, and no, never going to happen. Right? If I could just get them to respect this part of me. No, they're not going to. Right? People don't do that. That's not how it works, right? You are their child, right? They are the parents, you are the child. So you were never going to convince them of anything, because if they did that, then that would mean that you, the inferior one, were convincing them, the superior one. A lot of parents get into this, right? They know they teach their children. Their children do not learn anything from them. Right? I don't know. See, I'm from a small town. I grew up in a more traditional family structure than a lot of people have. I think they're a little bit different, right? Culturally, they're very different. But, if you're maybe, and it's similar for people, who come from maybe an immigrant background too, right? They have more of a traditional family structure. I know people now that like grew up in the cities, or they grew up in like the suburbs, and their like parents are their best friends and they smoke marijuana with their parents. And I don't know. That's not how I grew up. Okay. And, if you come from like a traditional family, a more traditional authoritarian family, your parents are not, you're not going to convince your parents that being a communist is okay. You're not going to convince your parents to become communists. They may never respect this aspect of you. But they'll get used to it after a while, right? They'll think you're just going through a phase. They may denigrate it after a while. But after you've done this for, a decade or so, they're going to go, oh, okay, well, this is just part of who they are. And they're just going to have to deal with it. And, the other thing is, once I think a lot of parents, especially now, have a lot of anxiety about their children and their economic future. Right? They worry that, oh my God, my kid is getting into this ideology and they're going to drop out of school and never have any money and be, but if you can, live on your own, get a decent job, support yourself, and you're doing this, your parents will go, okay, well, I guess this is just a part of you that I don't understand. And okay, and that's the thing. As you become a fully independent, autonomous adult, um, at that point you can, your parents may not agree with you, but they'll be forced to kind of just go, okay, well, this is who you are, and you're an autonomous adult, and they won't have as much anxiety about it, though. So, someone asking what my parents' ideology were. We were the only Democrats in the town. Almost everyone in the town were Republicans. My family were Democrats. My mother had been involved in labor struggles. Yeah, you're all still trying to figure out who my dad is, right? I'm not gonna. I almost told you, but I didn't. My mother had been involved in labor union struggles, and my dad is a mystery. But you know, free speech, Nazi, fascists. Um, you know, um, they're conservative, right? My mother is deeply religious. My father's pretty conservative. They're Democrats though. They're liberal in the way they vote and stuff, but they're on the conservative end of things. Now that politics has gotten a little more weird in the United States, they're a lot more liberal than they were when I was a kid, I guess. And that's their business, right? I mean, they can speak for themselves. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I didn't grow up in a Marxist household. I didn't grow up in an activist household either. My parents, they talk about politics a lot, but they're definitely not activists. I don't think either of my parents had ever been to a protest or a demonstration. I remember asking them that, and they never had. And I thought, how can you have been around in the 60s and never have gone to a protest? And they said, well, we didn't want to get arrested. We didn't do violent stuff like that. So, whatever. I mean, they were, they're whatever. They're boomers, and yeah. There you go. All right. Next question. All right. Someone says, how do we refute claims that you're a Nazgul? It's like, how do you refute claims that I'm a magical purple unicorn? How do you refute claims that I'm the big flying spaghetti monster, or the big or the one-eyed, one-horned flying purple people eater? Right? I mean, I don't know. There's no such thing as a Nazgul, right? There was a party in Russia that existed in the 1990s, and it was called the National Bolshevik Party. I've never been a member of that party. I do not agree with that party's ideology. But that party, it should be pointed out, was not a Nazi party. That was a party that had well, whatever. I'm not, see, if I start explaining it, then I become it. So whatever. But like, I met with a person named Alexander Dugin, who's a very important political thinker in Russia, who's a conservative, right? Who's a traditionalist, but he denounces fascism. And in fact, his first book, his most important book, The Fourth Political Theory, like, denounces fascism in the first sentence and has whole chapters denouncing fascism, also denouncing communism. He's a very important thinker in Russia. He's a conservative traditionalist. He leads something called the Eurasian movement, right? And he's anti-imperialist, and he has some very interesting insights, and I've learned a lot from his work. But his views are not mine. I'm a Marxist, right? I have an optimistic view. I believe in historical progress. He does not. So it's like, so I talked to somebody who thinks something. So I talked to somebody who's no longer a Nazgul. So that makes me, I mean, this is like, right, this is getting silly. This is getting silly, right? So if people are, and trust me, folks, if you can't get over this, right, mind you, I've had people who are like my friends, and then they like, someone showed them that I spoke on a video with Dugin, and they denounced me. Go, please. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, folks. I'm not in this to be popular. I didn't meet with Alexander Dugin. That's a fact, right? And my whole speech is on my YouTube channel. You can watch it. You can watch my speech. You can watch the entire speech I gave, right, from beginning to end. And no, I did not denounce Marxism, Leninism at any point, right? I talked about populism and the need for left-wing populism, and I criticized the left for, and the Congress for Cultural Freedom and such, and he spoke about populism from his point of view on the panel, and that's that. I mean, that's all there is to it. And there were Trots in the room. You know that? There were actually Trotskyites in the room with me at that conference, right? People point to the fact there were some right-wing people there, and there were some Trots in the room as well. And, it was a small little gathering that I went to. Didn't know I was speaking. I found out I was speaking like 5 minutes before I got there, and just got up to the podium. It's like, okay, all right, here I go. And I spoke, and that's that. And if you can't get over that, right? If somebody who's just like, oh my God, well, good. It's a fact. And if you can disagree with things I say, you can disagree with things I do. But if this is something that you just cannot possibly keep listening to me because I am clearly Satan, I am clearly a Nazbol, red brown, crypto Nazi, fascist collaborator, white supremacist. If you can't get over that, bye bye. I'm sorry, but again, I'm not trying to be popular here. I'm not a grifter. If I was a grifter, I would have never done that to begin with, right? Because I'm actually interested in what anti-imperialists have to say. But if I was a grifter, I would have gone, oh, I better not, go to that because I don't want to possibly be associated with somebody who's bad in American media, right? Or if I had become a grifter, I would have come out and I would have cried, I'm so sorry I ever met with this person. Please forgive me, Vosh, please. I'm not doing that because I don't regret doing it. There's nothing wrong with meeting with anti-imperialist intellectuals around the world. So, I'm here. I am here telling you that I met with Dugan and I would do it again. And I don't agree with him on a number of points. And he is a very important anti-imperialist intellectual in Russia. He is a traditionalist conservative. I am an anti-imperialist and a 21st century socialist. We have different views, but I've met with figures in Iran that are very, very different in their viewpoint. I'm not ashamed of that. I've met with people in Venezuela. I would happily go to China and meet with people in China. I would happily go to Zimbabwe and meet with people there. I have met with anti-imperialist Zimbabweans. I'm sorry, if people are rallying against imperialism, you know, I'm interested in talking to them. And if people are interested in helping dismantle this imperialist system, I'm interested in talking to them. And if that doesn't win me, if that gets me on I swear there's bots, right? I was talking to Chris Haluli about this, the communist candidate from Vermont, right? It's same thing with him, right? It's like certain people you get I swear it's like you post in any forum or anything and immediately there's like 10 posts below saying the exact same smears and distorted half-truths about you, and it's very suspicious, right? But they do the same thing to him, right? I don't know anything about his personal life and his marriage and something that happened in Boston with some political group. I don't know anything about it, but I do know that you can't post a video of Chris Haluli, the communist candidate for office in Vermont. You cannot post anything related to him without the same 10 allegations being posted. That's weird. I really, really don't think there's people who sit there and are just, fanatical 24/7 anti-Chris Halali activists. There are bots out there, right? And it's the internet. And I really don't think there are people who just sit there all day as anti-Caleb activists. No, I'm not that important, right? There's only 274 of you watching right now. So as much as I'd have a very inflated sense of how important I am, I really doubt that there are people who just sit in their basement eating Cheetos all day. Oh shit, somebody posted Caleb on Reddit. Well, I'll show them. No, I'm not that important, right? There are bots, okay? There's some automated computer stuff going on. That's what's going on here. This is not natural. It's not normal, and you'll notice it doesn't happen to people that aren't anti-imperialist, right? Look, well, never mind. But there are many people who've done many things that are questionable, but aren't anti-imperialist, right? And so there's a pass. Look, folks, let me ask you this, okay? Let me just throw this out there, since we're talking about names and all that. Vosh wants to legalize child pornography. There are articles on the internet about friends of his who turned him into the FBI for admitting he has looked at child pornography. Right? Look at what he's done to Hakeem lately. Right? Folks, if all of that is forgivable, but I can't sit down with an important, prominent Russian intellectual, ask yourself where these people's priorities are. Just saying, right? I don't advocate legalizing child pornography. I think child pornography should be illegal, and people who make it should go to jail. That alone should make me about 20,000 times better than Vosh. And if in your mind, Vosh, who openly calls for legalizing child pornography is A-OK. But Caleb, who sat down with the guy in Russia, is bad. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that's it. I mean, I that's all I can say. I mean, that's a value judgment that you can make, okay? That's all there is to that. Way too much time on this question. All right. Gramsci in relation to the USA. You know, I've been reading Gramsci, actually. I bought a Gramsci book. I've been studying the prison notebooks a little bit. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's supposed to be so amazingly profound. I mean, it's good. He was a communist. He was a tanky. Gramsci was a tanky. It was really, you know, it was the cultural stuff. It was actually, you know who it is? It's Pete Buttigieg's father, who was really key in popularizing Gramsci's work. I bet you didn't know that. Pete Buttigieg's father was the head of the International Gramsci Society, and worked. You know, it was a American intelligence, right? Very much worked to try and push, you know, the more cultural interpretation, the Frankfurt School Marxism, you know. So, but you know, I've studied Gramsci here and there, and when I was in college in sociology and in political science, he would be quoted and stuff. He's widely respected in academia. He talks about cultural influence, etc. So there you go. All right, yeah, all right. Did Stalin supply the Nazis with oil? Yes, Stalin sold oil to the Nazi regime throughout the 1930s. That happened. That is correct. You are correct, right? The Soviet Union did business with the Nazis. That is a fact. What else is a fact? The Soviet Union did business with the United States. That is a fact. And in fact, the oil industry of the Soviet Union really benefited from a certain chemist named Fred Koch, whose two sons are known as the Koch brothers. Henry Ford, who was a fascist, did business in the Soviet Union. You know, there were all kinds of American businesses that had business deals with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a country. Countries tend to trade with other countries, right? The Soviet Union, you'll remember, went around throughout the Western world trying to build an anti-fascist alliance. Every country said no to them, except France. And France temporarily had one and then broke it. The Soviet Union aided the Spanish Republic in their fight against Franco, and they stood alone, other than Mexico. There was no other country in the world but Mexico and the Soviet Union that supported the Spanish people against fascism. After Spain was defeated, you have 1939, right? And the Soviet Union has gone around the world trying to build an anti-fascist united front. The Nazis are expanding. And in that situation, the Soviet Union signed a pact with the Nazis to buy time from the inevitable invasion, and that pact was broken. So, you know, there you go, right? That's a fact. Alrighty, Mahler, right? I know Gustav Mahler, right? I don't particularly, Wagner, Mahler, again, it's a little bit fun, but sometimes it can be a little bit too much. All right, AOC's new law on Tibet. It's mega crap. I wish she wouldn't do that, right? Tibet separatism is not good, right? I'm disappointed in her again. All right. Is it necessary to join a communist party in the United States? No. No. If I was you, right, I would get involved with the Center for Political Innovation. Maybe join DSA so you can meet people. I don't discourage people from joining one of the existing communist parties, but I'll be honest with you, I don't think any of those parties are at this point going to lead us to socialism, right? The reason that the Center for Political Innovation is being created is because we need to get beyond this. We need a new strategy. We need to change in order to win, right? The left needs to quickly change its tactics, and all the communist groups, from my experience, are in a rut, right? So if you want to join one of those, I will never stop you. I will never try to discourage you from doing it, but I'm going to tell you that they're in a rut. And I would hope that you'll be part of the Center for Political Innovation, which will be about trying to reorient our tactics and try to have the conversations that will lead to an effective left emerging. Because right now, we have a lot of groups, but none of those groups are really doing what needs to be done. I'm trying to have a think tank that will help facilitate the discussions that will lead toward changing the left so that things can actually get done. right? And keep in mind, CPI is not a party. And dual membership, anybody can be a member of any party, right? There's no ban on members of any group, right? You can be there's people in the Communist Party who are involved. There's people in the PSL who are involved. There's people involved in the DSA that are involved. There are people in different parties, Socialist Party who are involved. There's no ban on anybody in the CPI. It's a think tank, not a party. But the CPI is where my energy is. I don't have confidence in any of the existing groups. All right. Should the CPI publish a book on Marxism? No. No, I mean, I'm sorry, but I've thought about that many times, and I've even written drafts and so. But Marxism is not really that important. I mean, at the end of the day, right? I did a podcast about the history of Marxism with Brenton Langle, and it's a great podcast. It's out there, The Legend of Sam Marcy. And it was a big influence, and it was a big deal in my life. Marxism was a very big deal to me because I was in the Workers' World Party for 8 years, and I knew people who had been trained by Sam Marcy, and that wing of, that Trotsky, Stalin mishmash, tanky Trotskyism or whatever. I know that wing of things well. It's a big deal in my life, but in terms of American politics, Sam Marcy is relatively unknown. And a book on Marxism, if anything, that would just serve to advertise Marxism. And Marxism is wrong in a number of key ways. I don't think Marxism is correct. So, I mean, I have studied extensively the history of the Workers' World Party and written documents, but it's not, at the end of the day, it doesn't really, I don't know if it would be worth our time. It might be worth having a class or a seminar or something, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's one case study, right? It's one ideological current that comes out of the Cold War in the United States. And I mean, I'm no longer a Marxist. I think Sam Marcy was dead wrong on a number of points, but I'm heavily influenced by Marxism, right? I mean, I was in a Marcyite group for years. I knew people very closely who were very intimate with Sam Marcy, and so, the Marcyite tendency has had a big influence on me, but would it be worth the CPI publishing a whole book on the history of Sam Marcy? I don't think so. I don't think so. And plus, we might get sued or something, right? I mean, well, that's a whole other thing. Anyway, all right. What is Trump's worst legacy? I don't know. I mean, it seems like what Trump is doing right now. He's admitted he lost the election, so now he's trying to whip up his supporters into an anti-communist frenzy. Just the other day, just yesterday, he tweeted out this deranged anti-China manifesto about Chinese communists have taken over the country. And it seems like now he's admitted he's lost. So basically he's telling all of his supporters, hey, I'm going to lose, but hate communism. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things about Trump that are pretty awful, but, he made politics in America a lot stupider. Just this afternoon, my wife turned on a show. It was one of those shows that was talking about Trump, and I was like, I'm sick of watching it. I'm sick of Trump. I'm tired of Donald Trump. He lost the election. Go away. It's been 4 years. I've been thinking about nothing but this guy. He's been a huge disaster. He murdered Qasem Soleimani. He tried to overthrow the government of Venezuela. He fell on his face with Korea. He mismanaged the pandemic like a fool and just completely fell on his face in the pandemic. He wrecked our economy. I hate the liberal, critique of him, and I don't like the liberals are worse than him, basically. The liberals are pro-imperialist, but is there any reason that, do I see him as this persecuted victim? He's fighting the deep state? No. Come on. I there were some things about Trump, the idea of Trump, that were good, right? Like he was going to stop meddling around the world. He was going to end the wars. But, no, I'm tired of Trump. Moving on. That's my feeling. Moving on. Will Biden and Maduro talk? Well, it's possible. I hope so. I kind of doubt it. Venezuela and the United States were certainly, things got a lot worse under Obama, and Biden has not indicated he wants to do that. But is it possible? Sure. All right. Is racism a big problem on the U.S. left? That's interesting. Yes and no. Probably the most blatant form of racism that I ever saw on the U.S. left is there's and I talked about this on the podcast with Angie Speaks. I saw this many times, and I look back on this, and it really makes me angry. It's a white savior complex, right? But it's mixed in with very, very bigoted assumptions. You know, a lot of boomer leftists, a lot of old communists, right, who were, they were, 1960s radicals, they really want to be the savior of black people. They have it in their head that the other white people are all racist, the other all white people are all rednecks, but they have been brought to the earth to save the black people from the other white people. That in and of itself is a little bit disgusting. But then on top of that, they have this weird double standard that is really loaded in racism. For example, I was talking to a certain person who was watching, or is probably watching now, or was at least watching earlier. We were talking about, in a certain political group I was with, they said, are people allowed to be religious in that group? Because some communist groups are very, very atheist, and some are not. And the person said, well, you can be religious in this group if you're black. And that's true, right? The group basically, if you were white and you were religious, they thought you were they thought you were a bigot. They thought you were stupid. But if you're black, it was like, oh, you cute little black person, you're religious. Of course you are. Yes, you are. Okay, you can be religious, you cute little black person. It was racism, right? It was this belief that, oh, of course black people would be religious because they're inferior. But if a white person is religious, that won't be tolerated. That's racism. And this happened for a lot of social conservatism, right? Black, if you were in the group and you were white and you said, I think homosexuality is wrong, they'd be like, you will not think that. You are, how dare you? They would be like, you are homophobic. But if a black person said, I don't like gay people or whatever, they'd be like, oh, well, that's too bad, you cute little black person. I swear, right? Corporal punishment, right? If a white person spanked their kid, oh my God, you're a child abuser. If a black person spanked their kid, oh, well, that's cultural, it was like this, and it's racism, right? Now, this is from a group of people who think they're anti-racist, but it's loaded in that they really do think, when people act that way, what they're basically saying is we think black people are inferior, right? We hold white people to higher standards than black people. That's what they're saying. And even though they profess anti-racism and support the black community on all kinds of causes, they still have this belief that black people, like that black people are somehow inferior. And that is I saw that, and it's very disgusting. And it was things like that I think kept a lot of black people away from Marxist groups, right? A lot of Marxist groups are run by white people, and they have this attitude toward, they all want black members. They're desperate. Oh, we want to be the party that leads the black people. But they also don't really respect black people. They see black people as, and it's a problem. It's a big problem, right? It's a big problem. And, I mean, that's racism. That is absolutely racism. And so is there a problem with racism on the U.S. left? I would say so. The white savior complex, right? I mean, it's obviously better to be have a white savior complex than be in the Klan, but I mean, the white savior complex views black people as inferior, right? Thoughts on having national organization to unify parties in the U.S. and build a consensus. Europe has something like that. All right, national org to unify parties. All right, that's racism. I mean, and there are other things. I noticed that around the issue of race, there was a lot of hypocrisy around the issue of racism and how you deal with it. For example, one thing I noticed, and again, people are going to get this is not politically correct what I'm about to say, but I'll just say it, right? So if a racist white person were to say something like, kill all black people or all black people are criminals, we rightly, as Marxists, would say, that's racism. How dare you? Right? If a racist, if a white person would say things like, all Mexicans need to go back where they came from, they've taken our jobs, we'd say, that's racism. How dare you? But Zionists, and New York City has a lot of Zionists in it. say things like all Arabs are terrorists, Islam should be outlawed, Muslims ought to be put in prison. They would say all kinds of very, very racist things against Arabs and Muslims. And the communists didn't agree with this. They didn't agree with it, right? But it was always like, oh, that's so sad. No, it's not so sad, right? If a white person said blatantly racist things against black people, you would condemn them as a racist. If a white person said blatantly racist things against Latinos, you would condemn them as a racist. But if a white person who is Jewish and Zionist said blatantly racist things against Arabs and Muslims, that was a mistake. It was like an understandable mistake. No, it's not an understandable mistake, right? It's not an understandable mistake. I mean, no. I mean, if you're saying that all Arabs are terrorists, all Arabs should be killed, all Muslims are terrorists, you are being racist. You are being a bigot, and you should call it out. But there's this weird, like forgiveness for that. It's like, oh, you have to understand. No, I mean, yeah, and that drove me crazy. That drove me crazy, that double standard. It really, really got me angry when I would see that double standard, right? I don't hate Muslims, I mean, I have a great amount of respect for Islam, for the time I've spent in the Middle East, and communists generally understand that Islamophobia is bad, that Muslims are not their enemy, but there's this, among a lot of communists, there is this weird double standard where Zionist racism is an understandable mistake, and the racism of white Gentiles is, repugnant and should be destroyed. Well, all forms of racism should be destroyed. That's my belief. And Zionists say very hateful, racist, white supremacist things all the time. And I don't appreciate that there was a double standard around that, right? And that, also, to be fair, sometimes there are people who say things that are inherently racist and they don't know it, okay? When a Zionist says kill all Arabs, they know they're being racist. They just don't care, right? But there are times when there will be white working class people, or Zionists that, there'll be people that will say racist things and not realize it. They won't understand, right? And, those, like, for example, right? The term illegal, right? If you say someone's an illegal, he looked like he was an illegal, that's racist. That is, right? You cannot determine someone's, immigration status by looking at them. And if someone is undocumented, they are a person who's undocumented. They're not an illegal, right? Their immigration status does not define them. But in the wider culture, people talking about people being illegals, that's just the way people talk. So if somebody comes around and they're like, oh, I think we should legalize all the illegals, you say, well, we don't call them illegals, right? Okay, and you explain that. You got to be patient with them, right? I mean, they're well-meaning people who are on the right side of issues can sometimes say things that are not, it's not how we do things, Like, if someone's undocumented, they're not an illegal. They're an undocumented worker, right? And that when you say the illegals, that's clearly a term. People say, well, it has nothing to do with race. Well, and, you don't say that when you see a group of people from Ireland, right? You don't see a bunch of Irish guys at a bar and you say, I wonder how many of them are illegal. No one says that, right? You know what you're saying when you say illegals. It's a racist term, right? But somebody might not know that, right? If you're in an all-white community, if you're a white person and you're not around people from different countries, you wouldn't know that. So you just talk to them, right? Late Leo Panich, from econ professor from Canada, was like, okay, I don't know who he is, never heard of him. So yeah, I don't know. There's other examples you can give, but the white savior complex is condescending and has racist elements to it, no doubt. And a lot of white revolutionaries hate the white savior complex. That's one thing. There's the double standard around Zionist racism. I don't appreciate that. So there are racist issues in the communist movement, just like all society. I'm not saying the communist movement is racist. I'm saying that there are problems, right? The communist movement is generally made up of people who make a conscious decision not to be racist. But does that mean that there aren't problems, that develop in the movement? Of course not. You asked me my honest opinion, I gave it to you. All right, free speech for Nazis and fascists. Well, look, I used to take the position that there should not be free speech for fascists, right? I used to take the position that, they won't give you your freedom, so we shouldn't give them theirs, etc. I don't think that way anymore. And the reason I don't think that way is because of the fact that basically, I'll just tell you, the reason I don't think that anymore is so many people call me a fascist. I mean, when people started calling me a fascist, all of a sudden, I have never been a fascist. I've never been a white supremacist. I've never been a fascist. But all of a sudden, all these people on the internet are talking about me as if I am a fascist, and that is a fact. And then that made me think, wow, on the basis of that, someone could put me in jail or somewhat. You know what I'm saying? And that kind of scared me. And the reasons that they were giving that I was a fascist is because I took genuine communist positions. I support North Korea. Well, North Korea is a communist. Nope, they're fascist because that's what Vosh said. And all these people are on the internet calling me fascist, right? I realized at that moment that even though I'm a communist, even though I've got years of anti-racist activism under my belt, even I could be considered a fascist, right? And that made me think maybe we shouldn't give the liberal order the authority to shut people up. I don't think people should go around saying racially offensive things. I don't think hate speech is good. But then when it occurred to me that, geez, even though I'm an anti-racist and an anti-fascist, all these people who are liberals have decided I must be a fascist because I disagree with them. That made me think, geez, maybe this giving the liberal order the permission to deplatform people and silence them is not a good idea. So, that's when I started to think that. And then on top of that, I noticed that, that the liberals, I don't know. I noticed that a lot of people, that the problem with the fascists right now is that they're wrong. They're ideologically wrong. And if you never argue against them, their ideas just get stronger. And that there's a necessity to refute these ideas. And there's a lot of people who should become communists who are becoming fascists now. And that the left has oriented itself into this pure way where we never engage with ideas and we just call people Nazis and punch them. And that's actually helping fascism. And this attitude, no free speech for fascists, right? That attitude is probably a huge gift to fascists. And it's actually benefited fascists. Fascists appreciate that. On that basis, I no longer feel that way. I don't like fascism. And in fact, I don't know. That's that. So there you go. I think a lot of people that are fascists, look, are just confused, right? There, a lot of people on the internet, wanking about Julius Evola or wanking about all kinds of weird shit. A lot of the people that are like in that fascist milieu are just kind of weird intellectuals, right? You have your violent wing, right? You have people that are committing hate crimes, and no one should commit a hate crime. Anyone who commits a hate crime should go to jail, right? Anyone who engages in fascist terror or violence should go to jail. There's a lot of people on the internet that are just young white men who are wanking about Julius Evola I don't even know if they're really fascists. They might think they're fascists, right? But they're on the internet talking about Julius Evola and talking about Oswald Mosley, and they're not. They're just kids. A lot of them are teenagers. They're just teenagers. At the end of the day, a lot of them are just confused teenagers who are looking for something to believe in and are reading books and getting political. One thing I will say about our culture is that Americans, I will say, think a lot deeper about politics than they used to. And that a lot of the people on the internet that think they're fascists are just confused teenagers who don't know what they are and are reading books. And I would like those people to become communists and abandon their racism, abandon anti-Semitism, believe in class unity and class struggle, and help us move towards socialism. And if all of them immediately get sent to jail because they have a confused idea, it won't help. So I would rather like to, the ones who are just confused ideologically, I'd like to win over. Now, if someone's being violent, if someone's engaging in violent, there's no excuse for that, right? And that needs to be met with, they need to go to jail. If you're going around committing crimes, if you're threatening people, that's a different matter. But people on the internet who think they're fascists, at the end of the day, there's a wide spectrum. There's some really hateful, vile stuff out there, and there's also a lot of people that are just weird, confused intellectuals, and those people need to have their views changed. That's my view. All right. A national organization to unify parties. Look, I have said many times that unifying all the communist parties into one is a bad idea, because all the communist parties that exist currently are really small and isolated. And they are all really small and isolated for a reason, okay? And if you were to try and unify them, you would have to accommodate all of their backward tendencies, right? I would rather have communists unify with the masses and get to the masses than have all the different, alphabet soup of irrelevant groups get together in the same room and try to find something they can agree on. Not a good use of time. Left unity is not a good use of time because the left is so small and so irrelevant. And in order to get them to all agree, you'd have to have them to agree to a bunch of wild shit. I mean, you'd have to accommodate a bunch of their backwardness. How about we break with this backwardness and actually get to the masses? How about that? That's my belief. Oh boy, folks. Oh boy. It's been fun. I think that's all the super chats. I can talk and talk and talk, can't I? All right, folks. Well, that concludes tonight's broadcast. My best wishes to all of you. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I think we'll end the way we always end. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Remember that we need a government of action to fight for working families. Good night.